The Piscataway Township Planning Board meeting will please come to order. Adequate notice of this meeting was provided in the following ways. Notice published in the Courier News. Notice posted on the bulletin board of the municipal building. Notice made available to the township clerk. Notice sent to the Courier News and the Star Ledger. Mr. Barlow, would you read the open public meeting notice, please?
Yes, Madam Chair, in keeping with the Department of Community Affairs guidelines with regards to virtual meetings, in keeping with the COVID pandemic, I believe that the board has complied with the DCA guidelines and it's appropriate for the board to go forward in a virtual setting, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Ms. Buckley, would you please call the roll?
Mayor Waller,
Present.
Councilwoman Cahill,
Here.
Ms. Corcoran,
Here.
Ms. Saunders,
Here.
Yes, you.
thank you.
Here. Sorry, I had to use my other line.
That's okay. Reverend Kenny,
Here.
Mr. Espinoza,
Here.
Mr. Atkins,
Here.
Mr. Foster, and Madam Chair.
Here. The flag is over my left shoulder, my right shoulder. Can we all pledge allegiance to the flag? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States
of
of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation,
under
under
God,
God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. May we have the swearing in of the professionals?
You're on mute, Ms. Saunders.
Sorry, please raise your right hand. Do you swear that the testimony you're about to give will be the truth and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you.
Mr. Espinoza, can you put your camera on, please?
Can he hear you? Mhm.
I think so. He's on mute, but I just need him to turn his camera on.
Sorry, I'm sorry about that. I will turn on my camera in a few. I just got to prepare it.
You can go forward, Madam Chair. while he's
Okay,
waiting.
may I have a motion to pay our duly audited bills?
Madam Chair, Reverend Kenny, I make a motion that the bills be paid.
Do I have a second?
Carol Saunders, second.
Roll call, please.
Mayor Waller,
Yes.
Councilwoman Cahill,
Yes.
Ms. Corcoran,
Yes.
Ms. Saunders,
Yes.
Reverend Kenny,
Yes.
Mr. Espinoza,
Yes.
Mr. Atkins,
Yes.
and Madam Chair.
Yes. Mr. Barlow, are there any amendments or changes to tonight's agenda?
Madam Chair, with regards to the agenda dated July 7th, 2022, there are no changes to the agenda that I am aware of.
Okay. Item 8, adoption of the resolution to memorialize action taken on June 8th.
Madam Chairman, I'd like to memorialize,
There are no resolutions for this
No,
evening.
there are none.
oh, no resolutions, sorry.
Oh, okay.
Finish the sentence. That's okay. There are minutes though, so we can do number 9.
Okay, adoption of the minutes from the regular meeting of June 8th.
Madam Chairman, I'd like to adopt the minutes from the regular meeting of June 8th, 2022.
Do I have a second?
Madam Chair, Reverend Kenny, I'll second it.
Roll call, please.
Mayor Waller,
Yes.
Councilwoman Cahill,
Yes.
Ms. Corcoran,
Yes.
Ms. Saunders,
Yes.
Reverend Kenny,
Yes.
Mr. Espinoza,
Yes.
Mr. Atkins,
Yes.
and Madam Chair.
Yes. Item number 10, which is, or whether 22 PB09, 90 Hancock Road LLC, a major final subdivision. Mr. Mongelli.
Madam Chair,
Madam
you don't
Chair.
have the revised agenda that I sent to you.
Well, I have the most recent one I downloaded. Which one?
7/7. Revision dates on the top right-hand side.
Okay.
It's the one I emailed to you today, Ms. Smith.
Okay.
And I emailed them out Friday. In any case, number 10 is the discussion item for 1551 South Washington.
Mr. Espinoza, how's the camera coming?
Madam Chair, you want me to re-email it?
No, I have it.
Oh, cool. Very good.
But the most recent one I have says, well, what it just, I'm not, no matter. There's no 90 High Hancock Road?
Yes, but that's number 12, but the two discussion items are first.
Okay. Item number 10, discussion, area in need of study for redevelopment, block 5301, lot 1404.
Good evening, members of the board. I'm James Clarkin for Site Planning. I'll be presenting the in-need study for 1551 South Washington Avenue, also known as Block 5301, Lot 14.04. Can everyone see what I'm sharing?
Yes.
All right,
Yes.
great. All right, so I'm going to start with the map, which is actually at the end of my report. I think it gives good context. So this is the site in question. I always remember it as the old Paychex building because that's what was on the side of the building for many years, but it's a 4-story Class B office building, about 190,000 square feet in size. It was built in 1986. It's located in your LI5 light industrial zone. So on the map, you can see 287 running along its southern border. To the west and north, you have some light industrial warehousing, also a self-storage facility. And then to the east, you have a residential neighborhood. The building itself is about 190,000 square feet in size. And it's surrounded by a parking lot, as you can see, and access roads. And that's really what constitutes the site. So I am going to, give me a moment, scroll back up to discuss more about the study area itself. Right, so I visited the site on February 3rd of this year to take some photos of the existing conditions. I also did some research into your building permits. And the biggest takeaway I took away from that was that there have been no upgrades to this building, whether it's the facade, the operations, or the systems, or just improvements in general, since it was built in 1986. The only permits that I saw were really for like security upgrades, so by tenants. So I think it's fair to say that it's mainly remained the same since 1986. And I also researched the historical occupancy of the office building, and it clearly shows a steady decline since the mid-2000s. The last time this building was fully occupied was 2005. Since that time, the decline has been steady. In 2012, it had 60% occupancy, so almost 2/3 full. And then the decline continued because by 2016, that had gone all the way down to 35%, so dropping to almost 1/3 full. And then the pandemic hit, and obviously this kept the occupancy rate under 40%. So the vacancy rate is approximately 60% as of today, with only about 6 tenants in it. So it's definitely underutilized with a lot of vacant space inside. That was the main takeaway, but before I get into the analysis of the in-need study criteria, I just want to touch on the environmental aspects. As always, I take a look at NJ GeoWeb to make sure there's no major environmental concerns. I did not find any. Technically, this does count as a known contaminated site. I looked into this further, and what happened is there's a former in-ground hydraulic lift system that they removed in July 2019. And when they removed it, they found some small soil contamination that they had to remediate. It has been remediated. It is totally clean. but the record remains. So that is why if you do research, you'll see that it's a known contaminated site. But for the purposes of this study, there's no environmental concerns and the site is clean. I already went over surrounding land uses when I showed you the map. And as I mentioned before, it's in your light industrial 5 zone, which you are very familiar with. So I'm going to skip down to the bottom of page 7 of my report. As you very well know, your master plan states that as vacant developable land diminishes in the township, redevelopment, adaptive reuse efforts will increase and become much more important, particularly within older sections of the township. And as this site has been around and first developed in 1986, and the residential neighborhood to its east was well before that, I definitely believe this constitutes an older area of the township that could see some redevelopment. So I believe that this in-need study is consistent with your master plan. And as always, since the entirety of Piscataway is in the planning area 1 of the state plan policy map, we are consistent with the state planning area classification. So I'm going to jump to page 9, which is where I analyze the study area conditions. So I'm going to roll through the photos, but basically what I found was that the parking lot was almost entirely empty. The exterior building did not show any signs of dilapidation or deterioration, but the inside conditions were much different. Lots of signs of vacancy and non-use were found on every floor, with the 6 tenants that I found occupying the building interspersed throughout. So on page 10, I took a couple photos of the parking lot. You can see that it is mostly empty, actually totally empty on this side. So the amount of parking provided is much more than is needed for the number of tenants. And then this is the first floor, west side, if you're looking at the front of the building. So as you can see, that entire section is vacant and not in use by any office tenants. These are more photos of the first floor, which really show the same conditions, you know, totally vacant and not ripped up, but all the amenities have been taken out as they don't have any use. And then this is the second floor. Very similar condition. The only difference is that the carpet still remains, but it is totally vacant on both the west and east sides of the second floor. The top photo is the west side of the second floor. And then continuing, this is the third floor. So this is some dilapidation. The roof is obviously, or the drop ceiling has been ripped out and some of the lights are dangling. So that's some deterioration that has been caused. You can also see some of the ceiling tiles have fallen off in this vacant spot in the third floor. And really, this is kind of the conditions that we saw on every floor when I walked it, you know. Big open vacant spaces, and then followed by once in a while coming across a occupied space. So this is on the top floor, the 4th floor, where Tingley Rubber has space, but right next door, another big wide open vacant space. So these existing conditions that I photographed obviously coincide with the historical records that I just mentioned about having a over 60% vacancy rate. So that is quite significant in my view. And I think this evidence provided supports criteria B and D of the New Jersey Redevelopment and Housing Law. So B criteria, based upon the evidence gathered, the building found that the conditions meet the stated qualification of an office park with significant vacancies for at least 2 consecutive years under the B criteria. The photos and the historical records clearly show a discontinuance of office use, but more importantly, the significant vacancies throughout the building. And since the vacancy rate at the beginning of 2020 was over 50% and has continued to increase through 2022, that's 2 consecutive years. And in my opinion, over 50% vacancy is considered significant. So in my professional opinion, the significant vacancy has existed for over 2 years, as well as past significant vacancies, such as in 2016, but all those together meet the B criteria. So the vacancy tied with the discontinuance of office is evidence that the B criteria is met by this office building. And then I also found that the D criteria applies here, as if you look at the photographic evidence, and even if you look at the aerial of the building, it's this odd design which kind of creates these dead ends and odd office configurations. And I find this to be an obsolete and faulty layout that would need to be fixed if someone was to come and use this as a modern office space. But more importantly, as we know, COVID-19 turned on a spotlight to, just the ineffectiveness of centralized office space. Work from home, the Zoom meeting is obviously taking place in most of our homes. So it has made a lot of these large office buildings and office parks obsolete. This also conclusion is consistent with the sharp downturn nationwide with office space, both before and during the pandemic. Also, as I showed in the photographs, the parking lot is oversized for the number of tenants. So this is excessive land coverage. So altogether, the obsolete nature of the office building, the excessive land coverage of the parking lot, and the overall faulty arrangement means that the study area is obsolete and meets criteria D. It's detrimental to the general welfare of the community because reasonable productivity has worsened, resulting in a negative impact on the economic well-being of the community. The significant vacancy of office space over a long period is detrimental to the township because of lost productivity and diminishing land values. So in my professional opinion, the office building and the study area in question meets the D criteria. Also, I found that the study area meets the H criteria, which is the smart growth planning principles criteria. As we mentioned, we are in the state's planning area 1. We're very close to 287, so there's definitely a great opportunity to leverage existing infrastructure, which I believe can be, which I believe can be leveraged if this study area is redeveloped. So in conclusion, I find that the study area meets criteria B for discontinuance of office space and significant vacancy, criteria D for excessive land coverage, faulty arrangement that's detrimental to the township, and criteria H for smart planning principles. So I think I would recommend that this be designated as a study area, as a non-condemnation area in need of redevelopment, and be considered for redevelopment by this planning board and the township council. That I can take any questions.
Are there any questions of Mr. Clarkin on this matter?
Madam Chair, it is Councilwoman Cahill. Hi, Mr. Clarkin, how are you?
Hi, how are you?
Good. I did have a question about this. So you're saying that this building in total has about a 40% occupancy rate right now?
Correct.
And is Paychex no longer using it at all, or because
Yeah,
you
so
said
I
there
just
were
brought
5
Paychex.
tenants or something?
Yeah, I just brought Paychex up because that's what some people may remember why it was built.
Yeah, I know the
But
building.
yeah,
right.
they sometime in the mid 2000s, I think they left. I'm not sure exactly when, but some building management company still operates the building. So there, like I said, there were 6 tenants in total. I don't know all their square footages, but
Right.
yeah.
And you said a building management company is managing the building, maintenance, all that stuff.
Yeah, so as you saw in the photos, the snow plows came and pushed all the snow for the parking lot. I think that's all. That's obvious that there's some sort of operation, but the significant vacancy, I think, is the key finding, that over 50% is vacant.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Any other questions from any other
yes.
members of the board?
Madam Chair, Reverend Kenny. Yeah, I looked into this building. I'm familiar with the building because I was interested in that building at one time. And Mr. Clarkin, and how are you this evening? Yeah, that building, I was inside. I got a tour. The management company was from Morristown, if I'm correct. And I met with the gentleman, and he took me around it. It's pretty bad inside. From the outside exterior, it looked not too bad, but the interior, wow. Thank you. That's the only comment I have.
Any other members of the board? Questions? Okay, Ms. Buckley, can we open it up to the public portion and see if there's any questions?
Nobody raised their hand, Madam Chair.
Okay, closed to the members of the public. What's the board's pleasure? Do you have any recommendations?
We're trying to raise our hand to speak about the public.
Oh, I didn't hear you. Ms. Buckley?
Well, yeah,
Sir?
there's a way to do it on the bottom. You click the hand thing to wave. But
Okay. Can we
Yeah.
see you, sir?
Trying.
Okay, is that you, Bob?
Yes.
Okay. Would you give your name and your address, please?
Yeah, my name is Bob Sisk. I'm at 4635 New Brunswick Avenue.
Do you have a question?
he has to get sworn in, Madam Chair.
Oh, Miss where's Miss Saunders?
Can you raise your right hand?
Yeah, okay.
You swear that the testimony you're about to give will be the truth and nothing but the truth?
Yes.
Okay, and you may ask your question, sir.
Yeah, Mr. Clarkin, could you explain you said the financial productivity is a burden on the township. Could you explain how a building such as most of the buildings in this town are at least 50% empty? That's a financial burden on the township?
Sure. So as vacancies continue to increase, the productivity is lost. And so the highest and best use of the land is no longer being met. So I find this to be a burden on the township, as there could be better productivity and therefore possibly better financial benefits towards the township.
I'm not sure I follow. How is the township losing money if the building isn't full?
I understand your question, but I think my argument is that office building rates, vacancies are continuing to increase, right? And it looks like the trend will continue. So there are other uses that would be better suited for the land that the township could capitalize on.
What percentage of the buildings in Piscataway would you say are 50% empty?
So I did not do an analysis of all properties in the township, but in the last several years, any office buildings I've looked at, I would say almost all of them that I've looked at out of a handful were either entirely or mostly.
So is it fair to say we could see this trend continuing throughout the town of the buildings that are half empty being taken over by the town?
I don't
Mr.
quite
Sis-
follow. So
You're not, no.
Mr. Barlow, could you, I'm sorry, could you jump in and just clarify what
Yeah.
redevelopment is? Thank you.
Yeah. Mr. Sis, nobody's suggesting that the township of Piscataway is taking over anything. In fact, this is designated a non-condemnation. It's just a designation on the property that it is ripe for redevelopment based on the testimony of Mr. Clarkin. The owner of the property, he still owns the property and can redevelop it in keeping with any redevelopment plan that might be adopted by the township. So this is not a situation in any manner that the township is, quote unquote, taking it over or directing what has to happen to it. It's just a mechanism, as Mr. Clarkin has outlined.
And Madam Chair, if I may, and Mr. Barlow, you could correct me if I'm wrong, and also Mr. Clarkin, is I think to better clarify why the township does this is because, as you mentioned, Mr. Clarkin, with office space not being utilized, we lose ratables. Is that not correct?
yeah. That is correct.
Okay, so the town in essence is losing money because the tax ratables that used to come out of the building when it was more robust and in use would have been much more than what we're getting now, and thereby causing what we've come to see in the past when businesses go out, where residents tend to bear the bigger burden of the taxes in town, where when I first moved in, right, super robust, we had 9/11, and then slowly from there, things started to happen, and the reverse became true. But only in the recent past, and I'm sorry, I don't want to go on too long, have we been able to sort of reverse that trend. And I think it's Mr. Sisk, I'm not the expert here, but I've been on this planning board enough times to know is that when we do this, it reinvigorates the property so that somebody new might be interested in coming in and putting in a building. It gives the property owner more mechanisms to attract different types of business that would be more robust, and thereby bring back those tax dollars that in essence were lost because of the vacancies. Is that about right? And correct me if I'm wrong. I don't want to mislead the resident.
No, I think, yeah, I would agree with that. And also I would just tack on that I mentioned that this is Class B office space, and I'm not a real estate agent, so I'm not an expert, but from what I understand, the older the building and the less amenities or improvements it has dictates what class of office space it is. So as I mentioned before, I looked at the records and there's been no improvements. So I think if it continues that way, the quality of the office space will continue to degrade, and thereby lowering the property values.
Any other comments from the members of the public?
No one's raising their hand, Madam Chair.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Buckley. It's closed to the public.
Wait, Mr.
Wait,
Mid,
there's one other person.
he's
Mr.
physically raising his
Midhill,
hand on camera.
would you unmic yourself, Mr. Midhill?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Would you state your name, and Ms. Saunders will swear you in? Your name and address, please.
My name is Mithil Parikh and I live next to the property 4647 New Brunswick Avenue.
Excuse me, what's the address?
4647 New Brunswick Avenue.
47, thank you.
Raise your right hand. Whether the testimony you're about to give will be the truth and nothing but the truth.
I do.
Thank you.
My question is,
Okay, go ahead, sir.
my question is, what does the redevelopment means? What are the options? And the second question is, the owner of the building, is he like tend to, or is there shown inclination to the redevelopment?
Sure. So first, just to clarify, the study that I just presented is actually 1551 South Washington Avenue. So that's just next to 287 and near the Walmart. But either way, redevelopment opens a number of tools. So, but basically there's a very, not long process, but laid out process in the law. So we're about in like step 4. So initially the town council asked the planning board, this board, to study the area. They hired me to do so. I did this study, I prepared it and showed my findings. So now they're gonna, if they agree with this, they will recommend to the council to designate it as an area in need of redevelopment. And what this does is it opens some development, like a toolbox sort of, where, sorry, excuse me, a redeveloper can be chosen and they can get some benefits or incentives to redevelop the property. So, but before a redeveloper gets selected, you actually have to have a redevelopment plan. And that redevelopment plan will dictate how the site can be redeveloped, like what kind of uses, how big, things of that nature. And then can you repeat your second question again, sir?
Is the owner inclined to redevelopment? Because what I understand is the owner still owns the property, and he might do the redevelopment if the township suggests.
Right. So Yeah, the owner could redevelop it. I don't know the owner's intentions, but the owner could be selected as the redeveloper.
And like redevelopment means, is it going to be a commercial or is it can be a residential?
Right, so that's where the redevelopment plan comes in, where we really determine what sort of uses can be put on the site. So there will be another hearing just like this at the same board, where we'll go over the redevelopment plan when it's ready. Assuming, yeah, go ahead.
You say this is stage number 4. So how many next steps are remaining? Like, what are the next steps?
So some are procedural, so that's why, but I would say the next major step that you probably would be interested is the redevelopment plan. So there will be a resolution that will go from this board to council. Council will vote on their own resolution and then ask this board to hire someone to do the redevelopment plan. And then you'll get another notice when the plan goes before this board.
And does the immediate neighbors has any say in this redevelopment plan? Like, can we reject any proposal? We don't, honestly, we don't want any noisy or anything like a public park or any sort of thing next to our homes or a warehouse, for example.
Yeah, so I believe at a hearing like this, you'll be able to be heard.
Just so,
we can like,
Sorry.
sorry.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Just so you're aware, all this is the planning board advising the township council. Either they think the property is in need of redevelopment or they don't think it's in need of redevelopment. So Mr. Clarkin has given his testimony as to why he thinks it should be redeveloped. This board will then vote whether or not they think the council should consider it for redevelopment, and we'll say, yes, we heard from Mr. Clarkin, we heard from the public, we think that the property is in need of redevelopment, non-condemnation. And then the council has to adopt that recommendation or can reject the recommendation or could change the recommendation. And then there'll be a redevelopment plan that they will decide should be done. And then a planner will be hired and he'll write a report as to what he thinks would go well there. And then this board will have another hearing and discuss that plan in more particularity. So this is just the step that says, yeah, this property has some problems and issues that under the criteria give rise to a need for redevelopment. And Mr. Clark laid all that out.
Okay. So my understanding is the council member will decide everything. If it's redevelopment, if it's needed or not needed. And after that, what should be done on as a redevelopment plan. The residents will have no say, or will they? The immediate residents next to the building.
Well, the residents always have a say. Council meetings are open to the public and can be, attended and commented on. And it's like I said, it goes back and forth between the planning. The planning board has to review any changes in ordinances or redevelopment. And we just recommend, the board recommends to the council, yes, it's in need of redevelopment. And then the council is the governing body that will ultimately decide that. So as Mr. Clarkin said, there's other steps in this process. No one is here today to say it should be a this or it should be a that. It's just, it should be something better than it is.
Okay. Yeah, we live next to 287. We have enough of 287 noise. We don't want anything more noisy things on our property besides our property. That's my only concern here. And I don't know whether we will. My concern was we will be having a say in this decision. That's why I'm here.
Understood.
And, Tom, if I may, it's Dawn Corcoran. I also want to just say that in addition to this presentation on the area needs study, there will also be a presentation on a redevelopment plan. There will also, even if the redevelopment plan is adopted, whomever's going to come forward with a project still needs to reappear or come to this board once again for site plan approval. So there are many opportunities for this board to hear the public's comments, concerns, and so forth.
As Mr. Clark said, we're like 4 of possibly 12, 13 steps. And none of this step has nothing to do with what might go there. It just has to do with, could it be used better?
So just out of curiosity, how much time does 12 or 13 steps take usually with all the histories you have?
I'm sorry, I didn't understand your question, sir.
So like we are at the step number 4, but usually how much time it takes going from step 4 to step 12, which is the end of the redevelopment plan? Usually 2 years, 3 years, 5 years.
It could take that long. It really depends. I mean, somebody has to, at the end of the day, someone has to be willing to invest the money in the redevelopment project. So nobody, you can't force someone to develop it. You can just provide them tools to perhaps make a more beneficial use of the property. So it's not happening next week or next month. It's a long process on purpose.
My question was only because I want to know how many peaceful years I have living next to this redevelopment. That's why.
Understood. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Are there any other questions from the public? Hearing no one say anything, and I don't see any hands.
Nobody's been raising their hands anyway, so I don't.
Okay.
I don't know, Madam Chair.
Thank you. This portion of the meeting is now closed to the public. Board members, let me have your desires on this particular discussion.
Motion.
Someone want to make a motion as to whether this is an area in need of development that should, then we'll have to do a resolution.
Madam Chair, Dawn Corcoran, I'd like to make a recommendation to council that the property be considered a non-condemnation area in need of redevelopment.
Or do I have a second?
Madam Chair, Reverend Kenny, I'll second that motion.
Roll call, please.
Mayor Waller,
Yes.
Councilwoman Cahill,
Yes.
Ms. Corcoran,
Yes.
Ms. Saunders,
Yes.
Reverend Kenny,
Yes.
Mr. Espinoza.
I'm sorry, Ms. Buckley. So I had some technical difficulty with, so I'm back on the cam and my mic is working now. So I think that for the probably 30% of it, I was not able to hear.
Okay, so just recuse you then. Okay, and Madam Chair.
Yes.
2, 4, 5, 6. Okay.
Okay.
You want to
Thank
do
you.
the resolution,
Dennis.
Madam Chair?
Yes.
Ms. Saunders?
Ms. Saunders, do you have a copy of the resolution? Ms.
Your mic.
I'm looking, I'm not,
I mailed it to you and I emailed it to you twice.
okay, hold on. I gotta pull it up because I gotta go back and forth.
Okay, you unmuted.
Okay. I'm on.
No,
mute.
it's on the screen and she's muted. I don't know whether.
No, I'm on the phone.
No, she's on the phone. She's good.
Oh, okay. All right.
Oh, yeah, because I couldn't do, my computer won't allow me to do both.
Okay.
I'd like to memorialize the resolution, designation of non-condemnation area in need of redevelopment for South Washington Avenue.
Do I have a second?
A second.
Roll call.
Mayor Waller,
Yes.
excuse me, Councilwoman Cahill,
Yes.
Ms. Corcoran,
Yes.
Ms. Saunders,
Yes.
Reverend Kenny,
Yes.
and Madam Chair.
Yes. Thank you. Item number 11, discussion, area in need of study for redevelopment for block 1701, lot 2.03, also known as 4100 New Brunswick Avenue.
Right, switching gears, James Clarkin once again at Foresight Planning for 4100 New Brunswick Ave. So I have the map of the site in front of you all. It's at the end of my report if you are looking at my report. So this is a lot. It's the one in red is the one in question, the study area. It's 11.7 acres in size. It's located in your M-5 manufacturing zone. This is actually in the northeastern part of the township. In fact, South Plainfield is right across the street to the east on that vacant lot. On here is a building 100,000 square feet in size. And it is about approximately 1 to 2 stories, depending on where you are in the building. And then it is surrounded, as you can see, by a vast parking lot, much larger than probably needed. It was originally built in 1967 and is currently home to someone called Transpacker Solutions. I'll get into the use first, but I'm gonna go up to this one. So I just want to note, you can see the back building, which is the 2-story part. This was an addition many years or several years ago for taller equipment, but I'll get into that. But this is the site in question. This is a non-condemnation area in need of redevelopment study. I conducted the site visit also on February 3rd to document the existing conditions. And I will go into what I found. So yeah, so really the main use is a warehouse and distribution facility with a small office area within it. And sorry, I lost my place. Here we go. So yeah, the building is currently owned and operated by Transpacker Services Corporation. So they operate this warehouse and distribution use on the property. And basically what happens is they receive raw materials such as bulk powdered food or drink ingredients. And then they actually take these raw ingredients and blend them in production rooms for a final blended product, which is then placed into packaging and reshipped out to its clients. So really materials are coming in, they're blending them, shipping them back out. So the main component of the facility is the warehouse distribution center or section, which is probably like 96,000 square feet, so it's the bulk of the facility. And then in the front, the part that fronts New Brunswick Avenue is actually 3,000 square feet. That's the office and is only 1 floor. So the large warehouse-like structure holds 18 production rooms where they do the production of these blended materials. Then you have loading docks in the back. There's storage throughout for the materials and products, as well as blending equipment. I did mention that taller part. You'll see a picture. It houses taller blending equipment, and so that's why the roof is higher.
Give me a call back.
So as always, to transition to the environmental piece, I took a look to see if there are any things of concern. I did not find any. There are wetlands in the forested area to the west, but nothing that's actually on the property. And then also to the west is the formal ChemSol site. So this was it's a known contaminated site. So I believe it's gone through remediation, but it does not appear that any of the contamination from that site has shifted over to this study area. So yeah, so surrounding land areas, or sorry, excuse me, surrounding uses, I mentioned the vacant site to the east. To the north, there's a storage facility as well as some residential areas. To the west is the formal ChemSol site. And then to the south is more light industrial, commercial, and also the Stop and Shop. So this part of my report is just the M5 zoning classification standards, so I won't go through those. I will touch on the master plan perspective. Once again, as vacant developable land diminishes in the township, redevelopment will become more important and increase, particularly within older sections of the township. As I mentioned, this area was originally developed in 1967. The ChemSol site was built probably around then, but has been demolished. So it's definitely an older section of the township that I think could benefit from redevelopment efforts. This in-need study is consistent with the state planning policy map. So I will shift to the photos that I took. and go over an analysis of the conditions. So on these two photos can show the interior spaces. So that blue partition is actually a production room. They can move these around as they need for whatever services they need to provide. On the right is storage. So it's somewhat typical warehousing storage. These are the loading docks, some more storage. This is the two-story tall blending equipment I was talking about in the rear of the building. And this is an example of a production room. And these are the offices. So as you can see, it's an operating facility and business, but in terms of in need of redevelopment, I really want to focus on the site overall. So as we look outside, we can start to see the scale and the size of the overall property and how a vast majority of it is impervious or paved surfaces that are just underutilized or not really needed at all. So this photo on the bottom here is to the, I guess, north of the building. And this is where employees and customers park. So it's really not very full, as you can see. There's way more parking than they probably would ever need for this facility. So the rest is underutilized, unused pavement. And I think this one is probably one of the better ones. This just shows the sheer size of the unnecessary pavement, and there's really no use for it. And I confirmed this with the business owner. So all of these outdoor spaces that they need are really close to the building. You know, they have their dumpster, they have their loading docks in the rear. There's no extra outdoor storage that they need. There's no, like, you know, queuing of trucks that need to use this space. It's just all just kind of sitting there and being vacant and underutilized. So, and I think this evidence really lends itself to showing that criteria D of the redevelopment and housing law applies to this property. So really the reasoning for that is the extra impervious surface is overwhelming in amount. It has no use or benefit to the current operation or to the township. And in my view, it's excessive and excessive land coverage, really. On top of that, it's a faulty arrangement due to the unused pavement. There's no need for it to be that big. As I mentioned, a small amount of the parking lot is actively used close to the building and for parking, but the rest is unnecessary and, in my view, negatively increases stormwater runoff and is an undesirable characteristic. So in summation, these observed conditions contribute to an obsolete study area. In particular, obsolete land layout, excessive land coverage, and faulty arrangement that's detrimental to the general welfare of the community because full economic productivity is lost. On top of that, the stormwater quantity is increased that has to flow off the impervious surfaces to any nearby streams, and also the stormwater quality is degraded. So taking this together, I think this results in a negative impact on the economic and environmental well-being of the township. And it meets the D criteria and is in need of redevelopment. I also found that the age criteria, the smart growth planning principles also apply, as it is relatively close, I think less than a mile to 287. And there's also other development in the area where existing infrastructure can be leveraged if it is indeed redeveloped. So in summation, I recommend that the planning board and council determine that the study area is an area in need of redevelopment, non-condemnation, because it meets criteria D and H of the statute. And yeah, and a survey and analysis of block 1701 lot 2.03 revealed the parcel's obsolete nature that is detrimental to the township. So with that, I can take any questions.
Are any questions from the boards for Mr. Clarkin?
Yes, Madam Chair, it's Councilwoman Cahill.
Yes, Ms.
Thank you so much. So Mr. Clarkin, you mentioned that with the amount of impervious land, that the negative impact because of it is increased stormwater runoff, but how long has that impervious land been there? Has it always had this issue? Like, what is increasing that stormwater runoff?
So it's just it can't naturally percolate through the ground, right? It has to run off the parking lot into the closest soil it can find, or maybe a local tributary. So really what happens is,
was there I mean, I don't understand like this issue had to have always existed then.
Yeah.
From when they put this lot in.
Yeah, I looked at some older aerial photos, and they don't go back that far because this was built in 1967. I only found some good ones till like the 90s, but it was always like this with the large parking lot. Yeah, so usually there's stormwater management, but that helps. But it's just really, I think what I'm getting at is the unnecessary amount of impervious surface.
Okay, so based upon this particular D criteria, which was the focus, I mean, most of the focus of what you spoke about, then it would feel to me like the idea here is to have less impervious.
Yeah, I think, like I said, it's like a faulty arrangement. It could be improved you could utilize more of the site while still reducing impervious surface with modern development techniques.
Yeah,
A reduced parking lot size, is that what essentially?
Yeah, I mean the building could be larger, but I think there's a better way to arrange the land than currently exists today.
Okay.
Yeah, I can't, Councilman Kale, who knows what the land use ordinances looked like in 1967.
Yeah,
right.
So
there probably wasn't even stormwater.
Yeah, we've come a long way, especially with stormwater runoff, that would clearly be a focus of this. You'd have the board engineer and the board planner looking for something that removes that sea of asphalt, and keep the water on site as opposed to running off site, which is obviously a detrimental condition. So trying to update it 54 years later. Yeah.
Thank you.
Any other questions from the board of Mr. Clarkin? Hearing no questions from the board, Ms. Buckley, would you check and see if there are any questions? I'm going to open it to the public. That being so, would you look and see if there are any members of the public that have questions for Mr.
Yes,
Clarkin?
Yes, Brian Rack has his hand up.
Okay. Mr. Rack, would you?
Yeah, sure. Brian Rack, 1247 Brookside Road.
Okay. Ms. Saunders, go ahead.
Can you please raise your right hand?
Yeah.
Swear that the testimony about to give you the truth and nothing but the truth?
Yes.
Thank you.
So my question was, you had mentioned that there were no wetlands on this property, but I'm looking at New Jersey GeoWeb and it definitely shows there's wetlands on the property. So
I believe when I looked, it was on the property edge.
Yeah, I mean, it's on like
but I don't recall. Okay, so I think what I meant to say is that it was not on the developed portion of the property.
Okay.
So like where the parking lot starts. So yeah, so there are minor wetlands on the property itself, but not with it like
not
the
developed area.
Yeah.
Okay, that was it. Thanks.
Yep,
Thank
no
you.
problem.
Thank you.
Any other members of the public have any questions for Mr. Clarkin?
If you have any questions, please raise your hand so we can see you guys.
Or press the button, because some people's thing is covered.
That's what I'm saying. They hit a button and it waves.
Mm-hmm.
There's no one else, Madam Chair.
Okay, close to the public. Board members, let me have your feelings on this discussion.
Madam Chair, Dawn Corcoran. Again, I'd like to make a recommendation to the council that this property be designated as a non-condemnation area in need of redevelopment.
Do I have a second?
Carol Saunders, second.
Roll call, please.
Mayor Waller,
Yes.
Councilwoman Cahill,
Yes.
Ms. Corcoran,
Yes.
Ms. Saunders,
Yes.
Reverend Kenny,
Yes,
Mr. Espinoza,
Yes.
and Madam Chair.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Clarkin. Item number
Thank you.
12 on our agenda
I
tonight is,
believe we have a resolution for that.
Yes.
oh, we do have, sorry,
Yeah.
we have a resolution.
Madam Chairman, I'd like to memorialize a resolution for designation of non-condemnation area in need of redevelopment for
Second, do
41.
I have a second?
Reverend Kenny, I'll second it.
Roll call.
Mayor Waller,
Yes.
Councilwoman Cahill,
Yes.
Corcoran,
Yes.
Ms. Saunders,
Yes.
Reverend Kenny,
Yes,
Mr. Espinoza,
Yes.
and Madam Chair.
Yes. Thank you. Item number 12, 22 PB 0990 Hancock Road LLC for a major final subdivision and Mr. Mangelli.
Good evening, Madam Chair. Richard
Good
Mangelli,
evening.
on behalf of the applicant. Forgive me, I'm losing my voice. We're here with,
Tell it to hold on just a few more minutes.
I will do. Here with my client, Patrick Callahan, and our engineer, Bill Lane. I believe we've met all the conditions of preliminary approval, and our engineer is available to answer any questions of the board or to present any findings or any aspects of the subdivision. We're seeking approval for 4 single-family building lots.
Madam Chair, if I may, it's Dawn
Yes, you may.
Corcoran. Just wanted to confirm that the applicant, as Mr. Mangelli has stated, has met all of the conditions of their preliminary approval.
Okay. That being so, do we have any other questions from the board, or can I open it to the public?
You can open it to the public, Madam Chair.
Oh, all right. Does anyone in the public have any questions of Mr. Mangelli for this property? You see any response?
No, Madam Chair.
Okay, you have the application before you, members of the board. What is your recommendation?
Madam Chair, Dawn Corcoran, I'd like to make a motion that we approve the application for final major subdivision approval.
Do I have a second?
Madam Chair, Reverend Kenny, I'll second that motion.
Thank you. Roll call.
Mayor Waller,
Yes.
Councilwoman Cahill,
Yes.
Ms. Corcoran,
Yes.
Ms. Saunders,
Yes.
Reverend Kenny,
Yes,
Espinoza,
Yes.
and Madam Chair.
Yes.
Thank you,
Item-
everybody.
Thank you, Mr. Mangelli.
Have a good evening.
You too.
You too.
Item number 13, 21 PB 34/35V is in Victor, 140 Circle Drive North LLC for preliminary and final site plan. Mr. Arch.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, members of the board and board professionals. My name is Tim Arch. I'm an attorney licensed in the state of New Jersey, and I'm here representing 140 Circle Drive North LLC. We are here today seeking preliminary and final site plan approval. We're seeking to add approximately 54,000 square feet, a warehouse addition to an existing warehouse building. It is in the LI5 zone, and there are 3 variances that we are seeking. Number 1 is the number of parking spaces. Your ordinance requires 334. We are proposing 101, which includes 14 land bank spaces. And then there are 2 variances related to a freestanding sign The purpose of the addition is to bring in a second tenant for that property, and having two tenants. Your ordinance only restricts us to one freestanding sign. We're requesting two freestanding signs. The existing freestanding sign is 39.5 feet from the right of way. We want the second one to be consistent with that, and so that requires a variance as well. Some brief housekeeping. I would just ask Mr. Barlow if we are properly venued and noticed in front of the board tonight.
Yes, notices are in order and the board has jurisdiction, Mr. Arch.
Thank you, Mr. Barlow. I do have several reports. I have a DNR report dated November 24th, 2021, a CME report that was revised July 1st, 2022, Mr. Hinterstein's report dated November 23rd, 2021, a fire marshal approval dated October 2021, and a DPW report indicating no comment that was in November of 2021. I don't believe there are any, and of course, Ms. Corcoran's recitation of the variances as well. I don't believe there's any other reports. I would just ask that those are the only reports that the board has.
Those are all the reports, Mr. Arch.
Thank you, Mr. Barlow. I will, and I also want to note just for the just on the outset, we will certainly be complying with the state EV requirements. We will certainly be complying with the solar ready requirements as well. The only reason that they weren't included in our initial submission is because, believe it or not, this was actually submitted before those laws were in effect. So that's the reason that they weren't initially mentioned in our initial plans. But we will certainly add those and comply with those. In addition, all of those reports, we can indicate that we will also comply with all of the comments in those reports. There's significant site improvement comments, and we are happy to comply with all those. So without any further ado, I do have 4 witnesses tonight. I would like to get to my first, which is Brian Ennis, our engineer, and I would ask that he come forward to be sworn in to give testimony.
Raise your right hand. Whether the testimony about to give you the truth and nothing but the truth.
I do.
Mr. Ennis, if you can please just let the board know for whom you work for, if you are licensed in the state of New Jersey, and if you've appeared in front of this board in the past.
Yes, so I graduated from NJIT with a bachelor's in civil engineering. I've been with Bowler Engineering for approximately 11 years. The business address is 30 Independence Boulevard, Suite 200 in Warren, New Jersey, 07059. And I've been a professional engineer for the last 7 years. My license is current, and I have testified in front of this board before.
Thank
you. He's acceptable to the board.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Brian, if you can, you've had an opportunity to look at the site, to work on the proposal tonight. If you can please just take us through what we're proposing and give us the benefit of your engineering expertise.
Certainly, and I can share my screen, correct?
Go ahead.
Great. Let me know if you see. You should see an aerial image.
Yes, we see it.
So I think we'll mark this as A1. It's an aerial exhibit dated today, prepared by Bowler. And for reference, north is to the top of the page. So kind of to summarize existing conditions, the site is 140 Circle Drive North. It's block 4101, lot 3 on map 41. The lot size is a little under 8 acres at 7.85. And is located in the LI5 light industrial zone where warehouse is a permitted use. Just to kind of summarize some of the adjacent uses, it's surrounded to the north by the Port Reddington Railroad main line, to the west by an industrial building, to the south by Circle Drive North with some development going on beyond, and to the east by another industrial warehouse building. I would also like to note that and I'll go into a little bit more detail later on, but this development does share a driveway with the development to the east. And as part of the preparation and kind of getting ready for this hearing, there has been an easement negotiated between the two parties to make sure that that shared access drive is legally represented on each end. The existing site as it stands today consists of an existing warehouse, loading area to the east, parking lot to the what I'll call the southwest of the existing building. The building itself, square footage wise, is 100,094 square feet. There are two driveways, and I'm going to zoom in a little bit more just so you can kind of see. There's two driveways, one to the west, and that is basically access to the car parking area, and then one to the east where it's the shared driveway with the adjacent industrial building, and that provides access to both buildings' loading areas. There is a 10-foot water line easement that runs along the eastern property line, and the railroad tracks again run to the north here. Having run through that, I'm going to pull up what I'd like to mark as A2, Exhibit A2. And this is basically the site layout plan, sheet C-301. It's the same plan that was included in the package submitted to the board, but this is colorized for presentation purposes. And the date of this specific exhibit is July 8th, 2022. As we mentioned previously, the proposed development, and again, I'm just going to zoom in a little bit more on the development itself. The proposed development of this site will include a warehouse addition of approximately 54,213 square feet, in addition to the existing 100,000 square feet that currently exists today. Proposed improvements consist of the expansion of the parking area, which I'll get into a little bit more detail later on. New concrete loading area, which is just to the east of the adjacent, or what I'll call the new portion of the building, the expansion. There are stormwater management facilities, 2 bioretention basins located along the frontage of the property, and landscaping and lighting, which I'll also go into a little bit more detail. As part of this application, 9 loading spaces are proposed, as you can see, striped just to the east of the warehouse addition. The concrete is proposed, and the darker shaded pavement area is what is being constructed as part of this as well. As previously mentioned by Mr. Arch, the applicant has agreed to install the 4 make-ready spaces as required by law. They will be located, and I'll zoom in a little bit more, in the bottom left or the southwest corner of the proposed parking lot. As you can see, there currently are 3 spaces right now. We will be adding a 4th, as mentioned in the professionals' letters. In addition, there was a question and comment about sidewalk along the frontage that is shown on this rendering that you see before you as well. The proposed layout is currently going through fire official review, and we will certainly work with him to make sure all comments are satisfied. And in addition to that, the application is a major development as defined by the NJDEP, as it is increasing impervious and the limit of disturbance is over 1 acre. I am able to let you know that the proposed development, as you see before you, does meet all requirements of the 2021 Green Infrastructure NJDEP regulations. And again, there's 2 bioretention basins located in the front with significant landscaping. And again, these basins are designed to meet not only the quality, but the quantity requirements of the NJDEP. As previously mentioned, there are actually no variances needed for bulk, so all setbacks and coverage are met and within the allowable limits of the code. And in addition, there was the comment that was mentioned earlier about the solar, and again, the applicant will be complying with state law as it stands today. In terms of parking, there are 334 parking spaces required by code, and that's based on the approximately 145,000 square feet of warehouse and an additional 8,000 plus of office. A portion of this parking lot is being demolished to construct the addition as you see before you. But in addition to that, we will be increasing the total parking. So as of today, the development has 70 total parking spaces. After the proposed development, there will be 101 proposed parking spaces. And that includes 14 land-based spaces as well, which are located along the western property line here. So you can kind of see there's some dashed line work here. And basically these are being banked in case that additional parking is ever needed. We just wanted to demonstrate that we can add them. However, the application as shown before you, we don't believe these spaces are needed, so we prefer to have extra landscaping on site as it currently stands today. As mentioned previously, there is a variance needed for parking spaces. Again, we are proposing 101 spaces, 14 of those land banked, and by code 334 are required. There will be some additional testimony in terms of that requirement and the variance we're seeking by the traffic consultant later this evening. The other two, or the last two, I should say, variances associated with this application are in terms of freestanding signage. So today, I'll zoom in again, at the western driveway, there's an existing freestanding sign. It's set back approximately 39.5 feet from the right of way, where 50 feet is required. The proposed sign will have the same setback, so 39.5 feet, and that will also be located at the eastern driveway. So essentially a little bit more of a symmetrical feel to the signage. And the proposed sign will need a variance for setback, again, 39.5 where 50 is required. And the fact that we are proposing a second sign is a variance that needs relief in itself. The proposed sign will meet all other height, area requirements, and final signage will be provided to the township as a tenant is confirmed. To kind of go into a little bit more detail of the circulation, again, there's two separate driveways. The western driveway is more for smaller vehicles and cars that are accessing the parking lot. So you would essentially enter on the western driveway from Circle Drive North, and at that point you can circulate the parking area. The wider driveway, which is the one to the east, and again, this is shared, and now there is an easement in place with the adjacent property owner. This is where trucks will turn in, and it'll access not only the existing loading area, but the proposed loading area, and also some loading docks on the adjacent building. In terms of landscaping, our development focus is essentially within where the proposed expansion is happening, as well as the parking lot. 40 trees that are 3-inch caliper or greater are proposed to be removed. 99 total trees are being preserved on site. The proposed plantings include 11 shade trees, over 100 shrubs, and a mixture of ornamental and perennials as well. 29 additional trees are owed by code for tree replacement. As part of this application, we are proposing a payment in lieu of the additional plantings. The plantings specifically associated with the bioretention basin, or the two bioretention basins, which again are along the frontage in between the building and Circle Drive North itself. There's over 100 shrubs in this, as well as a mixture of ornamental grasses. Our office and the applicant is working with a township landscape architect to maximize replacement trees planted as part of the development, as well as meeting stormwater requirements and working through the payment in lieu of the final trees for replacement. And again, no waivers or variances are needed in terms of any of the landscaping or buffer requirements. In terms of lighting, what's actually proposed is, again, just focused in the area of development. There's a one single head pole located at the southern end where my cursor is of the proposed car parking lot. One double fixture head located, again, where my cursor is, right in the middle of the proposed parking lot. And then 3 wall mounted lights. There's a couple on the western side, which faces the car parking, and then one that faces the 9 proposed loading docks as part of the expansion. I believe I hit on all my direct. I can certainly go through some of the letters in more detail if I didn't work them into the testimony.
Thank you, Brian. I think maybe the best, most efficient use would be to just allow for any questions at this point, and if there's any specific questions that need to be asked, they can be directed towards you.
Members of the board, does anyone have any questions of this particular witness?
Madam Chair and Councilwoman Kale, just to confirm that the retention basins are already there. Is that correct, or is that will there be additional work done in that area?
These are proposed bioretention basins.
They are
So,
proposed.
Yeah,
Okay.
brand new proposed to meet the requirements for the expansion and all new plantings within those basins.
Okay, thank you very much.
Yep, no problem.
Anyone else on the board have any questions? Hearing no response, briefly, I'd like, Ms. Buckley, I'd
Madam
like to.
Chair,
Yes.
just one comment.
Oh, okay, go
This
ahead.
is this Ron Reinertson here. This is the first application that is post the solar ready. I think that going forward, as long as they attest to that, they'll meet it. As Mr. Arts said in the beginning, it is sufficient. This is one that's open to interpretation because the solar ready says 100,000 square foot warehouse. It doesn't say if it's new or, this is a 41,000 square foot addition. I think it's just highly appropriate that going forward for this particular, the solar ready, that as long as they say they'll conform to the requirements, that could be a condition of approval.
Thank you. And actually, just to piggyback on that, we actually have a request for a written opinion letter to New Jersey DCA to give us some direction on when you have a situation like this where it's an expansion, where it's an existing building, new construction, how that law is going to be applied. So we'll certainly comply, but thank you for that comment.
And I caught a big typo there because I was actually, quite frankly, I was going on vacation for 4th of July week, and I said, I forgot the solar ready, and this is an older application. I had to put it on. Thank you for acknowledging our letter. There's a big typo there, but you got our gist. Just conform, confirm, and you did. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Reinerson. Any other comments from the board or questions from the board?
Madam Chair, I'm sorry. It's Councilwoman Kay. I just wanted to clarify because some people may not, who are listening and may not understand the payment in lieu of planting is that the plantings will still be done just in another part of the town, and the township will be responsible for taking care of that planting. And correct me if I'm wrong, Mr. Barlow or Dawn, on that piece.
No, you are correct.
Okay. Any other questions from the board? Thank you, Ms. Buckley. Do you see anyone who's open to the public? Is there anyone in the public that would like to ask questions of this witness?
And just as to his testimony on the engineering aspects, there'll be other witnesses that will testify as other
Just to
parts.
that, right.
No,
Well, seeing no response from the public, we'll close to the public. Mr. Arch, you may proceed.
Thank you. My next witness is Mr. Paul Going. He's our traffic consultant.
Mr. Goins, can you please raise your right hand?
Yep,
You swear that the testimony you're about to give will be the truth and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you.
Mr. Going, if you can please let us know your credentials and if you've ever testified in front of this board in the past.
Sure. My name is Paul Going. The last name is G-O-I-N-G, just like the word going. I'm a 1993 graduate of the Cooper Union for the Advancement of Science and Art, where I earned a Bachelor of Engineering degree in civil engineering. Since that time, I've been working as a traffic and transportation engineer. I'm licensed as a professional engineer here in New Jersey, as well as several other states. And I've been previously accepted as a traffic expert at numerous boards throughout New Jersey, including here in Piscataway.
Thank you. He may testify that he's acceptable to the board.
Thank you. Mr. Going, I understand that you've had an opportunity to look into the potential traffic impacts of the site. If you can please just let us know what you found.
Sure. My office, we prepared a traffic statement. It's dated October 26, 2022. It was submitted to the board. Basically, the site's about 8 acres, 7.8 acres. It's on Circle Drive North. It's in an industrial park. Circle Drive North intersects with Possum Town Road, just to the west of the site. And from Possum Town, you have access to and from I-287. The site's developed with about 100,000 square feet of warehouse. We have the 2 separate driveways, as previously discussed, with passenger cars on the westerly side of the building and the tractor trailers on the easterly side. The proposed project is 54,000 square foot expansion. So that's 54% of the existing building. The existing driveways will be maintained, as was previously testified. Sidewalks will be added, and the parking supply for passenger cars will remain on the westerly side of the building. It'll be expanded to 87 stalls, plus the 14 land bank stalls, as previously mentioned. 8 additional loading docks would be added on the easterly side of the building. And the first thing we looked at for this project was how much traffic can be expected to be generated by the new square footage. So traffic engineers typically use a publication called Trip Generation. It's published by the Institute of Transportation Engineers, or ITE. And this is a publication that has data for traffic generation for many different land uses, including warehouses, and it's from data that's collected all over the country. For warehouses, the ITE actually gives us the ability to get a breakdown of truck trips versus passenger car trips, which is useful. So using the data from the ITE, we calculated peak hour trips for the morning peak hour and the evening peak hour. For the proposed expansion, that would generate 30 additional weekday morning peak hour trips. Those are two-way trips, so that's 15 in or 15 out, or it might not be split 50-50, but that's the total in and out, and one of those is expected to be a truck. In the weekday evening, we calculate 33 peak hour trips, 2 of which would be trucks. So it's really a low traffic generator. An increase of fewer than 100 peak hour trips is not considered significant by the ITE or NJDOT. So our project is well under that threshold. And on that basis, it's my conclusion that the project would not result in a significant negative impact on area traffic. Moving on to parking. So the town code requires 1 stall per 500 square feet of warehouse floor area, plus 1 stall for every 200 square feet of office space in the warehouse. Using those rates, in the current condition, 219 parking stalls are required. And as was previously testified, there are 70 stalls there now. So we're currently 149 stalls deficient, which is 68%. The proposed project would increase the number of parking stalls to 101. That includes the 14 land bank stalls. And that includes the 4 make-ready EV spaces as well. The additional warehouse and floor area and office floor area in the expansion would increase our parking requirement to 334 stalls. So we're requesting a 233 stall variance, which is 70%. So we're going from a 68% deficiency that we have today to a slightly higher deficiency at 70%. So the town's requirement for warehouses is quite high compared to what's needed in the industry. I used another ITE publication. It's called Parking Generation. And that's a compendium of parking demand rates observed at different land uses at sites all across the country. So based on the ITE data, the average peak parking demand for warehousing is a rate of 0.39 stalls per 1,000 square feet, which is equal to 1 per 2,564 square feet. So the ordinance requirement is 1 per 500 square feet. So that's actually 5 times higher than the ITE rate. Why is it different? My opinion is that we've had technological advances. Warehousing does not require as many employees as it once did due to automation and other technological advances in the industry. So warehouses today really don't need as much parking. Using that ITE rate, I calculate peak demand for the site at 60 stalls. And that's for the full site, 154,000 square feet. So the 87 stalls or 101, if you include the land bank stalls, is expected to be more than sufficient for the use.
Mr. Going, did you say that the peak demand would be 60 what?
60.
Okay,
Yep.
thank you.
No problem.
Thank you, Mr. Going. If you have nothing else, I believe you're available for questioning.
Yes, thank you. Any members of the board, do you have any questions of Mr. Going? Hearing no answer, I'd like to open the.
Madam Chair, this is Ron
I'm moving
Ryderson
too
again.
fast.
I just, the testimony was that they were going to put in 4 make ready. The plans show that they were going to install originally in compliance with the a township ordinance, 3 EV actual active stations. So I just want to get clarifications. Are you going to install 3 EV active, EVSE active, and 1 make ready, which will be ADA compliant?
So I'll have to confer with my client, which I'll do during additional testimony. I do know that Levin Management, who is the owner of the site, I know they have a EV rollout, I believe, program to put in these EV chargers. I just don't know what the timing of that would be. So at this point, we'll certainly comply with the make ready status of the 4 spots, which is what the state requirement is. But I'll have to confer with my client as to what we would propose for actual EV charging at this time. But I can certainly.
And I just want to make a point to the board that this application predates the EVSE, and this applicant had committed to putting in 3 EV stations active, which complied with the township ordinance. And in my letter, I said, we continue to encourage that you install this, because that even though there's that the state regulations supersede the local. This is what you committed to before, and I would just, my recommendation is I would highly encourage that you put in live stations. The three that you committed to originally when you file the application. Again, the board can make their own decisions, but that would be my recommendation.
And we'll certainly come back around to that question after our next testimony.
And I'll defer to the board to pick that up if they wish to ask more questions on that.
Actually, before I forget, I just got the answer. So yes, we will commit to the 3 EV stations with the 1 make ready station as your encouragement.
Okay, thank you.
Well, thank you. Any other members of the board have any questions? Okay, we'll now open it to the public. Ms. Buckley, would you check and see if there's any members of the public that have any questions of this witness?
No one raised their hand, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Close to the public. Mr. Arch, you may proceed.
Thank you. Our next witness would be Mr. Joseph Davidson. He's our architect. If he can.
Mr. Davidson.
Davidson, can you please raise your right hand? Oops, sorry. Do you swear that the testimony you're about to give will be the truth and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you.
Mr. Davidson, if you can please briefly tell us your credentials, if you're licensed in the state of New Jersey, and if you've testified in front of this board in the past.
Yes, my name is Joe Davidson. I'm with Ignari Lummis Architects. I'm a licensed architect in the state of New Jersey and in numerous other states as well. I have testified in front of this board previously. Thank you.
Thank you. Go, you may proceed.
Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Davidson, oh, sorry. What's it going to look like? That's my question.
Yes, may I share my screen?
Yes, you may. Here we go.
Okay. I think as previously discussed in the civil engineering testimony, I'm just going to briefly go over that. We do have an existing warehouse space that we are adding onto. The addition is on the shaded area and is approximately 54,000 square feet. I know there was in the letters, that's what I'm going to address, is the materials and finishes of the addition and what is being done with the existing warehouse space itself. I am going to show some pictures quickly of the existing warehouse as it is now, so that you can get some context before I go over the proposed finishes and materials.
And Mr. Davidson, before you go into that, if I believe these renderings were not previously submitted, so if we can mark these your initial renderings as I apologize, Mr. Barlow, what number are we on?
I believe we went through A1 and A2, so we'd start with A3 was the architectural elevations, and he went to A4, or did he?
And the architectural plan, so I'll make that SD 101 would be A3.
Okay.
All right, and that is dated 9/17/2021.
Okay. And that's the floor plan.
That is the floor plan. The next, I'll just go through the, and that way we can cover these. SD 201 will be A4, exhibit A4, and that is the elevations. And then SD 901 is three-dimensional renderings, and that will be exhibit A5.
Thank you, sir.
Okay, and then back to the pictures. So this is just a small grouping of the existing warehouse as it was when we surveyed this a while ago, about a little over a year. This is the entrance to the existing office. You can see that it's a little bit in need of some repairs, but there is existing brick finishes at the office area, and then some basically kind of stucco coated plywood, we'll call it band at the office level. The warehouse itself is constructed of CMU, painted CMU, with some metal siding above that. And that's pretty consistent all the way around the building. So you can see the office area here kind of ending, and then the warehouse construction beginning.
Mr. Arch, with those 6 photos, I'm just going to let's mark them as A6, just photos of existing conditions. Is that?
I think that's fine. Just as one photo array, I think it's fine.
Yep.
Okay, and I can create a sheet for that to submit.
Thank you.
All right, so referencing exhibit A4, the elevations, what we have here is that existing office area on the front elevation. To the left side, and then to the right is the proposed warehouse addition. The existing finishes, what we are proposing to do is to provide some additional finish where it's in disrepair over that sign. We'll call it a sign band. It's not really a sign band. That would be kind of like an ephes finish, a textured ephes finish, to kind of clean that up in a gray finish. The blue siding would be cleaned up and painted. And then the brick itself would also be painted a gray finish to match the addition. On the warehouse addition itself, we are, I believe this is in the report, we're looking for, or on the civil plans, 35-foot clear height. Right now, we are proposing a 43-foot parapet height on that to achieve that inside. This would be constructed of concrete tilt-up construction, which is standard now in terms of the warehouse construction types that we typically see. That allows for the durability of the finishes in a warehouse environment, as well as some energy efficiency, as the insulation is sandwiched between 2 concrete panels. Those finishes would be painted with a textured paint that's typical, with light gray color, dark gray, and a light blue finish. And you can see those colors on this rendering elevations here. Going around the left side, which is the side facing towards the office entrance, existing office entrance, we created a new entry for the warehouse addition, which has aluminum glass storefront windows at the proposed office areas. And again, some white texture finish paint, a aluminum canopy, and then the same color palette on this side as well. That's on the rest of the warehouse, and proposed to be added to the existing warehouse. Going down to the right side elevation, which is actually the loading dock elevation. This was the concrete block that was tan in the existing building as it is now, and the blue siding. These will all be painted to match the new warehouse addition, which is again tilt up with the texture finishes in the light gray, dark gray, white, and blue colors. And then we have some additional loading docks and the drive-in loading dock door on this side. Next is exhibit, that was exhibit A5, which is the renderings of the building, where you can see the existing warehouse area, this dark gray sign band that's getting refinished on the existing office, the gray brick and block, and how that kind of blends with the warehouse addition that we are proposing.
Thank you. I have no further questions of Mr. Davidson. I offer
And members of the board, are there any
Um,
questions from the board
Madam-
of this witness?
Madam Chair, it's Dawn Corcoran. Just one question, Mr. Davidson. Is there any rooftop equipment being proposed?
There will be rooftop equipment, and I understand that we will need to screen that from view. So we will be screening that and locating that away from the parapet edge and screening it from view.
Great, thank you.
Any other witness, any other questions of this witness? Okay, I'll open it to the public.
Renee,
Excuse me. Do we have any questions from the public?
Mr. Davidson, if you don't mind, stop sharing your screen just so Ms. Buckley can see everybody. Thank you.
Ms. Buckley, do you see anyone?
I
Any
don't see
questions?
it, Madam Chair.
Okay, thank you. Closed to the public. Mr. Arch, do you have another witness?
Yes, our final witness tonight is Miss Allison Coffin. She's our planner, and she is here to be sworn in.
Ms. Coffin, can you please raise your right hand?
Yes, I can.
You swear that the testimony you're about to give will be the truth and nothing but the truth?
Yes, I do.
Thank you.
Ms. Coffin, you are a licensed professional planner, and I believe you've testified in front of this board actually just recently or fairly recently. Is that correct?
Well, I do spend most of my time in Piscataway in front of the zoning board, but I have appeared in front of the planning board. I think the most recent time may have been in 2019 for 151 New Bedford or New Brunswick Road, National Manufacturing.
Could you just give her the rest of her credentials, please?
Sure.
Sure. My name is Allison Coffin. It's spelled Coffin like the box. I'm a licensed professional planner in the state of New Jersey. I'm also certified by the American Institute of Certified Planners. I've had my license and certification since 2005. And since then, I've been accepted as an expert witness in front of boards in more than 100 communities throughout the state, though I tend to stick to Monmouth, Ocean, and Middlesex counties.
Thank you. She's
You're welcome.
acceptable.
Ms. Coffin, if you can please just provide us with your expert opinion.
Sure. I mean, the property we're looking at tonight is a 7.8 acre lot. It's got more than 500 feet of frontage on Circle Drive North. The rear of the site abuts the Conrail rail lines, and the site is developed with a warehouse office building that's accessed from Circle Drive by way of two existing driveways, the western or the eastern one of which is shared with the adjacent neighbor. The applicant is requesting approval to construct an addition to this warehouse office building. The proposed site improvements include the addition, rearranging the parking to provide a total of 101 spaces. That's 87 constructed spaces and 14 banked spaces. And that will include 3 active EV spaces and 1 make-ready station, as well as landscaping, lighting, and signage. The property is located in the LI5 light industrial zone, and the uses are permitted uses. As far as bulk, the application complies for lot area, width, depth, the front, side, and rear yard setbacks, building height, building coverage, minimum floor area, but they are requesting relief for the number of freestanding signs, proposing 2 or 1 exists. The sign setback, the existing sign is non-conforming, and they're proposing the new sign at the same setback, so they're consistent, and a variance for parking, which was discussed in depth by Mr. Going, our traffic expert. The requested variances are bulk or C variances, and there's two tests within the municipal land use law for this type of variance. The first is the C1 standard, which is commonly known as the hardship variance, and this is appropriate when things like a lot's shape, topographic conditions, or pre-existing structures create a situation where the strict application of the ordinance would result in hardship. The C2 standard, the second standard, sometimes called a flexible C variance, is justified when the purposes of the land use law are advanced by the requested variances and the benefits of the variance substantially outweigh any detriments. It's my opinion that the variances being requested with this application can be granted under that second standard, so they're C2 variances. So looking first at the positive criteria for these variances advance the purposes of the municipal land use law. Purpose A is promoting public health, safety, morals, and general welfare. Here we have signs that allow for proper identification for the multiple tenants of the site at 2 access points, which promotes public safety by allowing drivers of both passenger vehicles and trucks to identify their destination on the site effectively. We have Purpose C, which is providing adequate light, air, and open space. Despite the setbacks required for the signs, they don't negatively impact light, air, and open space. And the parking variance allows for the site to function well without paving more than what is needed, thus protecting open space. Purpose G is providing space in the appropriate location for industrial use, which this application achieves. And Purpose M, providing for a more efficient use of land. Again, this parking variance allows for the site to be used effectively and efficiently. Providing conforming parking on this property would reduce the usability of the site for the warehouse and office use while increasing the paved area beyond what is needed to support the proposed facility. So the ratio of building to parking as proposed is functional, appropriate, and more efficient, and that advances the municipal land use law. There is a public benefit to the variances that are proposed. These variances allow for the development of a site with an appropriate use at an appropriate intensity, and the proposed development of the site allows for proper site identification and parking facilities without creating that underused sea of asphalt that would be required to meet the parking ordinance. Looking then at the negative criteria, it's my opinion that there's no detriment to the variances that are proposed. The signage here is appropriate both in number and in location. The site has 552 feet of frontage and 2 driveways at either end of that frontage. The 2 signs, which are each located at one entrance, are necessary to identify the tenants and access drives for drivers looking for the site. They are several hundred feet apart and thus will not create visual clutter. One sign already exists, and the setback for the proposed new sign matches the existing non-conforming setback for the existing sign. The parking proposed is adequate to support the use. The parking is properly scaled for this size warehouse and office space. The parking on the site right now currently works at a deficit. The deficit is similar, that we're proposing is similar to what's existing. It's 68% versus 70%. The ITE indicates that the parking required is 60 spaces as identified by our traffic expert, which indicates to me as a planner that the parking proposed is adequate and will provide additional extra 27 stalls. Therefore, there would be no negative impact to that variance. The variances requested would not impair the intent and purpose of the master plan and zoning ordinance. Here we have a use that's permitted at an intensity of use that's permitted, and in its whole, this application advances the intent and purposes of the master plan and zoning ordinance for the use and intensity of use of the site, and the application improves the site in a manner which provides for a higher quality design of industrial development than what currently exists on the site, and expands the economic and tax bases of the township, both of which are goals of your land use plan. So for those reasons, it's my opinion that these variances can be supported. They can be granted without detriment to the health, safety, and general welfare of the public, and they do not impair the intent and purpose of your master plan and zoning ordinance.
Thank you, Ms. Coffin. I think that pretty much puts a nail in it. And I'm done by direct.
Okay, let me ask the board, do they have any questions of this witness, Ms. Coffin?
It was very thorough. Thank you very much. I mean, I just would say that the rule of thumb is substantial detriment. I mean, and I think the planner has testified there's really no detriment. And, you know, I think she presented it quite well. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Ms. Buckley, I'd like to open it to the public for this portion. Would you see if there's any people in the public who would like to ask a question of this witness?
I don't see anyone, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Closed to the public. Mr. Would you like to have a summary?
I don't think I could summarize it any better than my witnesses said it, so I will leave it at that. That's our presentation, and thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Board members. You've heard this application and its witnesses to support the application. Would someone like to make a motion?
Madam Chair, it's Councilwoman Cahill, and I believe too that based upon the existing condition, the improvements here, and then of course, obviously with the testimony talking about the advancements in warehousing and not needing as many employees, I think it's very wise that that we do as a board approve this application with the reduced amount of parking spaces. Of course, with the applicant's commitment about the 3 EV stations as initially indicated in the application, with the 1 EV station to come. You know, as far as I'm concerned, it feels to me that they've made their case about a least impact in terms of the variances required. So I would put it out there to the board that we approve the application as presented.
Okay, Madam Chair, this is Mayor Wall. I'd like to add a caveat to that. I want to make, Mr. Barlow, I want to make sure that the temporary construction easements and the right-of-way dedication gets recorded at the county clerk's office prior to an issuance of a temporary certificate of occupancy.
Absolutely, and that was also set forth in Mr. Hinterstein's report, which they have agreed to comply with. And Mr. Arch and I will work out the appropriate language for the filing of those. Is that fair, Mr. Arch?
Absolutely, and that is accurate.
Thank you.
Do I have a second to the motion?
Carol Saunders, I second it.
Thank you. Ms. Buckley, will you read the roll, please?
Mayor Waller,
Yes.
Councilwoman Cahill,
Yes.
Ms. Corcoran,
Yes.
Ms. Saunders,
Yes.
Reverend Kenny,
Yes.
Mr. Espinoza,
Yes.
and Madam Chair.
Yes. Thank you. Have a good evening.
Thank
At
you
this
so
time,
much.
I'll turn the rest of this meeting over to Reverend Kenny, who will preside over the balance of this meeting. Thank you.
Thank you,
Have a
Madam
good
Chair.
evening, Madam Chair.
Item number 14, Reverend Kenny, chairing. 22 PB 1314V, M&M Realty Partners at Piscataway LLC, preliminary and final site plan. Attorney Doug Wolfson.
Evening, Mr. Chairman, Reverend, Mayor, and Councilwoman, members of the board. Thank you very much. Betsy, you all set for recording this?
Yes, I'm great. Thank you.
Thanks, Betsy. I would just ask before we get started if I could impose upon Mr. Barlow to confirm whether the board has jurisdiction that our notices were adequate.
Yes, Mr. Wilson, I've reviewed the affidavit of publication, affidavit of service, and the board has jurisdiction to proceed.
Thank you. Members of the board, I am Doug Wolfson. I represent M&M. This is a piece of property that you all have some familiar with, I suspect. As you may know, just briefly, by way of background, this project in the form that you have before it was approved by the Zoning Board of Adjustment when the property was not zoned for this permitted use, but in fact was zoned rural residential. And we made an application for a variance for this very building and this very footprint based on a number of factors, including the obvious fact that the property was not properly zoned in this day and age for rural residential, given what has sprung up around it. That application was granted by the zoning board, having found that there were special reasons to allow that variance in this use, and finding further that there was no substantial detriment to the public good or zone plan and zone ordinance. You may also be aware that a lawsuit ensued by an objector group challenging that. And I'm pleased to announce to the board that that the complaint was dismissed by Judge McCluskey 47 days ago. And the reason I say that specifically is because the appeal period is 45 days, and our check to the appellate division is confirmed, at least our check to the appellate division is confirmed that there is no appeal of Judge McCluskey's decision.
Mr. Wilson, can I stop you for 1 second? There's some screeching going on in the background that I see a bunch of people. I don't know where that's coming from, but if you're not speaking, if you could please mute your audio just so we don't have that in the background. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. I just was getting hard to hear you, sir.
Mr. Barlow, everyone else is muted. I think it might be Mr. Wolf. As he speaks, it's
Maybe I have a fan going, I'll turn it off.
He's getting feedback from somewhere. It's his.
Oh, okay. I thought he had a parakeet.
Yeah, it's definitely his mic.
So, and this board is aware because after and during that entire process, the board engaged, or the municipality governing body engaged professionals to do a study of the appropriateness of the zone, which of course is one of our special reasons that we proposed through our testimony, and our planner, Christine Cafone, who you'll hear from briefly later this evening, and recommended, this board, in fact, recommended that the property be rezoned to the use, in fact, which it has now been approved for, and for which we're now seeking approval from this board. That too has been litigated by essentially the same group, and that case is pending again before Judge McCluskey. And as a plenary trial, I suspect that may take a year or two to get to trial and have a resolution. In the meantime, because the original zoning board case was dismissed as moot, but because we want to be able to apply the time of application rule, which Judge McCluskey mentioned in his opinion, which provides that whatever ordinance is in effect at the time of our application controls the application, and that's so whether or not the ordinance is later invalidated or amended. So we're looking to do that to make sure that we are protected and that the boroughs, the township's intent in having this property zoned in this fashion is upheld in a way that has been deemed appropriate by this board and by the council as well. So we have tonight to present to you Ron Allenbeck, who's our Director of Planning and Engineering and Development at Edgewood Properties, the parent company to M&M. We have a traffic expert, Mr. Seckler, and we have our esteemed planner, Christine Cafone, to go through. We will have Ron testify, and even though this has been an approved project and some of you have seen it, we want to make sure our record is complete, and that in the event that there is yet another appeal by a group, that we have as strong a record as possible to convince the reviewing judge that the zoning and the approval, if we get it tonight, is both approvable and sustainable. I would note for the record that we perceive this to be a completely clean application. I think we got a letter from Ms. Corcoran on the 7th indicating no variances are required at this time. We do have reports that we will go over briefly, but as you will see as we do them, basically the testimony is either their statements confirming our position or their statements that we will say we will comply with in terms of that. I believe there is one small waiver based upon a parking in the front yard, which Christine Cafone will address. And as it stands, that is the only deviation from what the ordinance requires of us. Again, it's a two-building, approximately 350,000 square foot twin warehouse buildings. We have parking far in excess of that, which is required by the ordinance. The traffic engineer for the town and ours are in agreement, I believe, as to the counts and everything that's included, but you'll hear from Mr. Seckler with regard to that as well. The warehouses, I think, have 3,000 square feet each of small office or administrative issues that may or may not arise in conjunction with the operation of the warehouse. So unless there's any questions or comments, I would like to proceed by calling Mr. Allenbeck as our first witness.
Would you swear him in, Carol, please? Mr. Allenbeck, swear him in. Carol?
Sorry, I had to unmute myself. Can you please raise your right hand? Do you swear that the testimony you're about to give you the truth and nothing but the truth?
You have to unmute, Ron.
I'm sorry, I do.
Thank you.
Next time, Ms. Saunders, you can swear at him.
No, one at a time.
Ron, would you please,
Right ahead.
I know that I did it, but if you would please just briefly summarize the nature of the project so that the board and the record is clear as to what it is we're proposing.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. If it's appropriate to share my screen.
Yes, you may.
I'm sorry, Mr. Barlow. Does Ron need to credentials and be accepted by the board first? I apologize. Am I wrong on that?
I am not sure if he's being offered just as a fact witness on behalf of
Okay.
the owner of the applicant, just to tell us what he's gonna do, and then.
Right.
Okay, fair enough.
Present experts.
Councilwoman.
Got you, thank you.
Yeah, Tom is right. Ron is not testifying as an expert.
Right.
Testifying as the owner's representative on what we are doing, so you're aware, and he speaks for ownership. But good catch. Go ahead, Ron.
Thank you. Mr. Barlow, this is what I'm referring to as Exhibit A1, which is an existing conditions aerial. I'm pretty sure everybody's familiar with the site. It is located south of Centennial Avenue. The page is oriented with north to the top of the page, South Washington Avenue to the right. It is approximately 24.5 acres, which has the frontage on South Washington. And it's immediately south of two existing warehouse buildings that are constructed to the north of us. This road that is shown to the top where the traffic signal is known as Knox Drive. The second the second exhibit I'm displaying on here is what we're going to refer to as A2. Again, this is just an overall concept plan showing the proposed project labeled buildings 1 and 2 or A and B. Again, with its frontage on South Washington Avenue in this area here, Knox Drive being immediately to the north. It shows that if you allow me to zoom in here, the development itself is approximately 660 feet to the school building itself and approximately 670 feet to the nearest residential located to the rear. As Mr. Wilson indicated, the project is for a total of 358,522 square feet. Each building will have approximately 3,000 square foot of office. Building A, or Building 1, is 184,848 square feet. And Building 2, the front building, is 174,674 square feet. The exhibit I'm about to show, sorry.
Oh, it's the screen.
Again, is a closer view of the overall site plan in color. Mr. Barlow referred to this as Exhibit A3. As I previously indicated, there's two buildings located in here. There is parking, approximately 93 parking spaces located in front of Building B, a auxiliary parking lot or second parking lot to the south with 63 parking spaces in it. There is 27 loading docks located to the rear of Building B. There is 60 trailer parking spaces located in the center of the site. And as you work your way west, you'll have 28 loading docks for Building A. All the way to the rear, there is 102 parking spaces in this area here. And then again, a secondary overflow lot, if you will, with 80 spaces located to the south. I will point out that this drawing is slightly different than what was submitted and is in your package. The reason being is we were contacted by the township and realized that these two overflow or ancillary parking lots were located within 50 feet of a residential zone. The township had recently rezoned this lower property. And in order to maintain the 50 feet, we had to adjust these parking lots. And again, to maintain that variance free. So those parking lots were, some parking was eliminated. And again, I'll put on record that these parking lots are outside of the 50-foot required buffer to the property to the south. Exhibit A4 is the site plan, sheet 2 of 2. Again, it's the proposed front building, and it's just really a zoomed in or a blow version. There is a driveway access located to the north, immediately south of Knox Drive, as well as a access drive located as far south of the property as we can. There are pockets of wetlands on the site. I will say on the record that we have secured our NJDEP permits for all of our outfalls. Those permits are current and valid for the next 4.5 years. Exhibit A5, again, sheet 1 of 2, just shows, again, it's a blown up version or zoomed in version of the rear building. Again, as you can see, there's a large wooded area to the northwest corner that's going to remain untouched, as well as you continue along the property line to the west, areas that will not be touched as part of the development. The area located where my cursor is, in this area here, is where the wetlands on the wetland permitting exist. The next exhibit, Mr. Barlow, I believe these drawings were part of the package that was submitted to the town, but if it's appropriate, this is the ground floor plan. I've marked it as exhibit A6, unless you tell me differently.
No, let's just keep marking them just so the record's clear.
Sure.
It's
Again,
a ground floor plan.
It's a ground floor plan prepared by Pratt Design, the architect. And again, as I indicated, it shows the 2 buildings on here. It does show the loading docks located to the west of the front building, as well as to the east of the rear building. Again, all the loading and trailer is located in the center of the site. There are a few ramps to get up into the building. And then you have the utilities that are located in the center and the back. The offices are located in the front building in the northeast corner, and then in this northwest corner. And there's also a smaller office located at the other corners to allow for maximum flexibility in the event that there's multiple tenants in there. The next exhibit that I will show you is exhibit A7, and this is the elevations of building A. Again, this just kind of shows you a colored rendering of what the materials are. These are tilt-up concrete panels that this board is familiar with. The architect provided variation in both color and texture to break up the facade. This facade is the west elevation, or the front of the back of the building that faces the school. This is the one that faces the interior courtyard. And then the last exhibit is building B. And again, this shows you what you'll see facing Washington Avenue. And again, the loading area is facing the rear or the interior courtyard. The side elevations that you would see from either Knox Drive or from the south side of the building. And this would be exhibit A8, again, elevation building B by Pratt Design. As indicated earlier by Mr. Wilson, with the square footage, we are proposing a total of 338 parking spaces. As I had indicated, located in both the front of the front building and 2 parking lots on the south, and then there's parking all the way to the rear. The parking does comply with the township ordinance. And Mr. Wilson, I believe that is an overview of the application that's presented to the board.
All right, let's go through briefly the reports and review letters received from the township consultants. I know there are not a lot of controversy there, but I want to acknowledge them for the record that we reviewed them. and what our position is with regard to those statements and those requests. Maybe we can start with Mr. Henderson's July 11th memorandum regarding our application. Would that be okay, Ron?
That's fine with me.
All right. Let's go through that. And that way, if the board or Mr. Henderson has any other questions, we can do that one report at a time, if that's okay with the chair and council.
Okay,
That's fine, Mr. Olson.
that's fine.
Go ahead, Ron.
Sure. As indicated, this is a review memorandum from Mr. Henderson, Division of Engineering and Planning. I will start on the page, on page 1. Under site impact, there's a variety of comments. Number 1, we agree to comply. Number 2, we agree to comply, and as indicated earlier, we have already secured some of our NJDEP permits. Whether or not we need one for sanitary sewer, but the only outstanding one, I don't believe we need that. So either way, we'll comply. Items number 3 and 4 are statements. Item number 5, we would agree to comply subject to the dedication that's provided along South Washington may cause a variance for parking setback. And I'll let Mr. Wilson touch on that. And then Christine Cafone, again, if the board or the board requires that dedication, and we do require the variance, we'll certainly put on the proofs. But Mr. Wilson, if you could indulge us.
Yeah, I would point out to and request confirmation from Mr. Barlow, board attorney. In our notice, we indicated that what our proposal was, and as Tom indicated, it was appropriate under the jurisdiction. We also included in our notice that if the board asked us to make any changes to our plan, or members of the public made requests that we acceded to, that we noticed for that as well. So while we're okay with giving the dedication that Mr. Henderson requested, that may be consistent with the township's master plan or traffic element of its master plan. We just want the board to be aware that if we do that, then the property line setback will of course change. And if it does that, it then causes a violation of what the ordinance requires for setback. We think that that's fine. It's not okay with us. We don't think it makes a big difference from a planning, safety, or other standpoint. Certainly aesthetics, it's a line in the sand. Nobody would really know that it's there except the engineers. But we just wanted to make sure the board was aware that if it made that a condition, which we would accept, that would be the result of it.
Mr. Wilson, do we know what the variance setback violation would be as a result of that?
It's a fair question.
Ron, do you know?
An indication of what the impact would be of that 52-foot dedication?
Yeah, let me just bring up the site plan if I can. So adequate question. Basically, we looked at this and all of the spaces, with the exception of the ones that, if I can see my cursor here, these spaces located in the very northeast corner where the property starts to widen out. There's about 6 or 8 spaces here that would not be affected by this variance. All the spaces along the entire frontage, maybe this last one might not be affected, would all fall within that 25-foot setback. After the dedication. Well, again, if you look at the property, because the way the property curves, obviously the ones in the center in this area here are more affected than the ones as you start working your way. So in this area here, the 25-foot setback goes through about halfway through the parking spaces. And then as you work your way north, it starts to get closer and closer to where it's really hitting a curb. And then like from this island north would not be affected. As it relates to the southern portion of it, again, as you get to the last stall, the back of the curb is right at the 25-foot setback. And obviously it increases as you work your way north till you get to this pinch point in the property itself.
You give the board a sense of.
I hate to interrupt. This is Ron Reinertson, and I apologize. My camera just went. Mr. Orbach's testimony was just on facts. Wouldn't this be more appropriate for the engineer? Because when I read the site plans, they met. I mean, the engineer prepared the site plans. they met that 25-foot setback. Wouldn't that be more appropriate for the engineer to answer these questions?
I'm not sure that I agree with that. We meet the setback now. This is more of a legal issue that relates to
But
the impact of agreeing to the condition. And all I want Ron to explain to the board, and I think what Mr. Barlow was asking was if it's not going to be 25 feet, what's the range of the infraction or the infringement?
okay, understood. I actually was trying to say that from how I read your site plan, you would meet it either way, but I will defer to the engineer to clarify that further.
Right.
As we go along. That's all. And
I haven't done the calculation. I'm not sure that Ron has, but whatever it is, we're prepared to agree to it. And it'll be up to the board to decide whether that's something that they think is a better alternative from the town's perspective than what I will characterize as a minimal violation of that setback. Like I said, it's a busy street, it's a warehouse. And frankly, I'm not sure that anybody would driving by would actually notice the difference, but it would be a violation, we think. And I would certainly leave that up to you, Mr. Rennerston, as well as our engineer.
And Mr. Wilson, I'm going to put it on record that you've removed the two. I mean, this will be a further testimony, but there were other encroachments that you've removed. So I just wanted to go on here. It looked to me like you were okay, but I'm happy to hear other testimony.
No, I haven't done the math. So if we're okay, you will meet
I you know what? One of the things is I'm going to just say that we were provided in our office, and Kevin Chen, our traffic engineers there, it was like not a full-sized plans. So it was a little difficult to read certain things. And in fact, my revised letter that I sent out yesterday, because I just, again, I was away last week, so I kind of had to address certain things. I couldn't read the zoning table. That's no criticism on PS&S. It's just I couldn't read it, But in the end, their plans were so clear in the last one. I think it'll be just fine that they testified that they'll comply with everything.
Okay, if I can just put on the record, the issue is the half-width right-of-way, which the municipality seeks in every application, and which is part of Mr. Hinterstein's report. It's kind of the double-edged sword, is what I think Mr. Wolfson's saying. He's noticed for a variance if it's needed. Right now, he doesn't need a variance. But if he complies with what Mr. Hinterstein is asking for in terms of the half-width, which is what the township would normally require, at some point on that frontage, and correct me if I'm wrong, Mr. Wolfson, the half-width will encroach and require a variance for a parking spot within the 25-foot setback. And the question I have, and Ms. Corcoran probably more than me, is just the board may be inclined to grant that variance, based on the application and the testimony. I just think we would like to know, is the variance, the setback's 25 feet and the parking spot that encroaches the most is 16 feet or 4 feet?
What is
24.5 feet? I get you where you're going, Tom.
Ron, what is the width now that's going to, is it 48 going to 52?
And Doug, Mr. Wolfson, this is Mayor Wall. Can I cut to the chase? We need the 52 half width. Let's move this application along.
I appreciate that, Mayor. We're prepared to agree to that condition. I believe the worst case scenario is about a 4-foot encroachment.
Okay. So a variance will be needed for 4 feet.
Right, as long as it's only for 4 feet. You can move along the application all you want, but if it's something more detrimental in terms of parking spots within the 25 feet, more than 4 feet or something de minimis, I'm not going to approve that. Just
Ron, do you know what's the width that we're using now? Is it 48?
I believe it's 48 and a half feet.
All right, so the most it could be, Councilwoman, is the difference between the 48 and the 52. So that's, if my math is correct, it's a 3.5 foot encroachment at its worst, I guess.
Okay, at that pinch point that you were pointing out. Okay.
Okay, and since the mayor seems strongly and the town seems strongly behind that request, If the board agrees to approve the application and wants to include as a condition that we make that dedication, the applicant consents to that on the record.
Thank you.
Is that good, Tom?
Do you have any other witness, any other one to call?
We were going to go through the reports, make sure that you're satisfied that we've complied with everything that Ms. Corcoran thinks is necessary and that Mr. Hinchstein thinks is necessary, Mr. Carley, just to make sure the record is complete. I don't want to really bore everybody. I know everybody's, extended this evening, but there is a history of litigation concerning this property with certain groups of people. So I need to make sure our record is complete. So if and when there is a case brought against an approval, should this board grant one, I can stand in front of the judge and make sure that it gets sustained and upheld, your decision upheld. So please bear with me. I know it's late, but I will go as fast as we can, consistent with what I perceive my obligation to be to the client.
Understood. If you want to just maybe just address the ones that are an issue.
Yeah, that's a good idea, Ron. Just go through them as the ones that will comply quickly.
Sure. On Mr. Hinderstein's letter, number 6, the decel lane, this is one that we would request a waiver from. And Mr. Wilson and Ms. Cork and Ms. Cofone will go over that because the decel lane is not required by the county, but I'll defer to counsel on that. On the balance of Mr. Hinderstein's letter.
Mr. Hollenbeck, if I may, I just want to point out to the board, however, that is a requirement as per our site plan ordinance. So I just want the board to be clear that it is a requirement under the township code.
I agree. Ms. Corcoran is correct that it is in the township ordinances. It is a county road. In the interest of time, I would like to come back to that when Ms. Cofone testifies, and then Mr. Barlow and I can have a conversation about how this can be done to the board's satisfaction. Since it's a county road and the county doesn't want it, we have to figure out a way to do this in a way that satisfies you all. So let's.
I disagree with the county.
Let's come back to that, Ron.
Sure. On page Mr. Henderson's letter, number 10, he points out a testimony regarding the parking space for the variance. There is no variance. That's just a clarification. And number 13, he's asking for building elevations, which I've shown. Everything else is either a statement or it's a will comply.
How about Mr. Rennerstein's letter of July 12th? First several pages really just deal with a description of the application that you've already gone through.
I was just going to say, just go to the planning comments, and that's really the punch list.
Yep. Go ahead, Ron.
Page 11.
Page 10, I think.
Just start on page 10 real quick, just as it talks about solar ready. I just want to put on record that we agree to comply with the requirements for the solar ready building. Just want to put that on the record. And then as Mr. Ronderson mentioned, we get to number 11. Again, number 1, clarification. I apologize for the 11 by 17 drawings, but again, it's our testimony that we've submitted variance free, obviously, depending on this parking situation in front with the 25-foot setback with dedication. I'm confirming that.
Ron, there's no apologies necessary. I just wanted to point out, I wanted to get the letter out. The original plans were fine. It's just I couldn't read the zoning table, and you guys had made a clear record on it. I just wanted, we can handle it in testimony today. I wasn't going to ask you to send me another set just before the meeting, so I just wanted to move it along.
Perfect.
Thank you. Of course, thank you. Again, number 2, again, we testified about variances and the waivers that are needed. I believe most of this letter, Mr. Reinerstein, will be discussed with Ms. Cofone, but on bottom of page 12, number 9, I am confirming that we have designed the site to avoid the 50-foot setback from the residential zone for those 2 southern parking lots. Number 10, I am confirming that there are no monument signs proposed with this application. Number 11, the operation of the trash compactors. Obviously, we do not have a tenant yet, but based on other warehouses that we have done, We felt that this is an adequate area. It really comes down to frequency for pickup, depending on who the tenant is and the generation of trash and recyclables. So we feel it's our testimony that these are adequate areas. Number 12, we have a letter from JCP&L that we provide to the board professionals indicating their approval of the site plan.
And I think that corresponds with the staff letter too about the easements and that, your legal right to use those.
Right.
Okay.
Number 13, there are no accessory structures. Number 14, as I indicated, we have secured our NJDEP wetlands permitings, and again, copies, if not provided already, will be provided. Everything else in the letter, with the exception of Ms. Cafone's testimony, justify that any variances or waivers is a will comply.
Okay. And Ron, did you redesign the site with the parking to eliminate the fence variance? Because it looked like the area itself was squared off before, and it's just been changed. Because I think my interpretation, I didn't have elevations, but that you were going to meet the fence height requirement.
Yes, and as you indicated, when we redesigned those, what I'll refer to as those southern parking lots, we eliminated what was a previous retaining wall height variance, a fence variance, and obviously the encroachment into the 50-foot setback. So those were all eliminated when we redesigned those areas.
Okay.
Again, to
And
make
one final item.
Sure.
We have a 9 parking spot difference between what your site plan was showing and what your parking table was showing, because it has to do with building A. You show 102 on the side of the building and 80 in that parking lot. The parking was not modified for building A. It was modified for building B, where you went down from, if I recall, 83 to 63 to meet the setback requirements, but the parking for building A was not changed. So your parking table doesn't match what your site plan has.
Yeah, that is correct, and that will be corrected. As I indicated, your numbers are correct with what I'll refer to as 182 located to the rear of the property, and then the 156 located to the front and the side of the front building. So that will be corrected on the site plan.
Okay,
but the
so
chart on sheet 3 is incorrect.
Okay, so and that's fine, and I will stop talking here. If Kevin has anything on traffic, I will defer to him. Other than that, I'm good.
Well, the next report, Ron, is traffic. We'll skip over that to have Matt Seckler deal with that when you conclude.
Yes.
The next one, we have a letter from Guy Gaspari, the Director of Public Policy Works, and he's asked for maintenance of the force main. What's our position with regard to that?
We agree to comply.
All right. And then we have a letter from, or a form from the fire chief that's dated 6/9/22, and it's indicated approved. Can you confirm that?
Yes, I can.
Okay. And then next we have the letter from DNR, which is Mr. Carley, which is dated June 22. Is there anything in there that we need to address, or is everything there a statement or will comply?
It's a statement or will comply.
All right. And I think that's it, right, Ron? That's all the reports?
Yes, it is, sir.
All right. So, Mr. Chairman, Chairman Kennedy, we do not have any further testimony from Mr. Allenbeck. Of course, he's available to answer any questions that board or council has, and he was obviously available to the public as well. And the next witness would be Mr. Seckler, our traffic engineer.
Does the board have any, members have any questions for Mr. Allenbeck? Laura, do you see? What about is there anyone in the public have any questions for Mr. Allenbeck?
No one, Reverend Kenny.
No? Okay, we may call your next witness.
Mr. Seckler will be our next witness. Perhaps Ms. Saunders could swear him in.
Carol?
I'm sorry, I didn't catch his name.
Matt Seckler, Seckler.
Okay, all right, Mr. Seckler, can you please raise your right hand?
Yes.
Do this testimony about to give with the truth and nothing but the truth?
Yes, I do.
Thank you.
Matt, you are testifying as a traffic engineer and expert, so would you please give the board the benefit briefly of your qualifications in this area and whether you've testified before this or other boards like it?
Yes, I have a Bachelor of Science in Civil, Matthew Seckler from Stonefield Engineering. Address is 92 Park Avenue in Rutherford, New Jersey. I have a Bachelor of Science in Civil Engineering from Union College in Schenectady, New York. Master's in City Regional Planning from Rutgers University. I'm a licensed professional engineer in the state. Also recognized professional traffic operations engineer, which requires both an examination and experience. Been practicing in the field for over 15 years, been accepted before over 100 boards as a traffic engineer, including your zoning board.
I would offer as an expert, Mr. Chairman.
You're okay as an expert. You may proceed.
Matt, you did a traffic analysis of the property and we received a traffic review of your analysis from Mr. Chen. Can you go through your study and his to confirm for the board that the traffic parking layout is all acceptable, consistent with the appropriate standards?
Absolutely. And again, we did prepare a traffic impact study for this property, following all the standard care in which traffic engineers like myself have prepared traffic studies like this for numerous development projects, including the application that's before the zoning board for the warehouse on this property. As part of the project, we did utilize counts that were taken prior to COVID. So the counts that were taken were from 2018 during the weekday morning and weekday evening rush hour time periods, 7 in the morning to 9 in the morning and 3 p.m. to 7 p.m. to capture what is typically the peak volumes along South Washington Avenue and the general vicinity of the site. We do note that although the counts were taken back in 2018, we did account for general growth in the area since 2018, basically accounting for a 1% compounded annually growth of those volumes that we had collected back in 2018. So we added 1% for 2019, 2020, all the way up to what we now consider a build year of 2024. Just to note, in terms of traffic trends, especially since COVID, I've been doing counts really throughout the COVID time period, just trying to find out where the new normal is. What we found is typically the rush hours are still a little less than they were pre-COVID, anywhere between 2 to 10% less volume on roadways compared to what they were pre-COVID during those weekday morning and evening rush hours, likely due to people having either flexible work hours or flexible work days, not everyone commuting at the same times. So really what we've seen is what was done in 2018 as the counts and then compounded above that likely represents a more conservative analysis than if we did counts out there today out there on South Washington Avenue. So our analysis, I believe, includes a more conservative analysis with some higher traffic volumes. We did utilize Institute of Transportation Engineers Trip Generation Manual. You heard from the previous application that this is definitive source for trip generation for all land uses, including warehouses. And we did account for both the split in traffic of passenger cars, most likely employees of the site, and tractor trailers, and accounted for that in our analysis. That kind of split, which is usually about 15% of the traffic during the rush hour may be larger wheelbase vehicles such as tractor trailers, with the remainder, usually 85% of the traffic being passenger cars. In terms of some kind of raw numbers you're looking at here, in terms of vehicles utilizing the driveways, for a site like this and this size, you're talking about 1 car a minute during the busiest peak hours being generated onto the roadway of South Washington Avenue. Most of the vehicles or most of the tractor trailers likely coming to and from the site via 287, coming off the South Washington Avenue exit and coming southbound to the site, and then leaving the site going back to the north. That's the most likely route for tractor trailers. We estimate about 85% or 80 to 85% utilizing 287. For passenger cars, again, it's a mix, generally where the employees would be coming from in the nearby areas, some coming from 287, other ones coming from points south, maybe from the New Brunswick area coming from the south via Route 18 or roadways such as that. So we did perform our analysis, reviewed the site driveways, both utilizing the typical industry software, and has provided this analysis to both your board's traffic engineer as well as the county. As mentioned, this is a county roadway, and they obviously have jurisdiction over our driveway movements as well. The design plan, as you saw from the exhibit that Ron had shared, included 2 driveways, a right in, right out driveway on the northern end of the site, and what we had designed as a full movement driveway on the south end of the site. I would note that in working with the county has requested us to reach out to the warehouse development to the north of us that has a signalized driveway on Knox Drive. We are in process of reaching out to them and looking to obtain a cross-access easement. We've had conversations again with the county that they would support our efforts in obtaining a cross-access easement so that our left turns can be made so that we could get a left turn movement in and out of the site via traffic signal. So again, we are in process of looking to obtain the rights to a cross-access easement, and the county again is in support of such a request from our driveway, from our site. So that would obviously modify the access point, so our southerly access point would not need to be a stop controlled full movement driveway, but instead the left turn movements would be obtained via the signal at Knox Drive.
And we do have a
however,
county approval, is that correct?
I believe we have a conditional approval with the county through this point, Mr. Wolfson.
Oh, okay.
So that
go ahead, sir.
Yes. So obviously that would obviously help facilitate movements in and out of our site, both safely and efficiently. Overall, in terms of access to the site and the way the site driveways have been designed, they've been designed to accommodate the tractor trailer turning movements into and out of the site. Within the site itself, the drive aisles, parking space dimensions, backing aisles in the area of the loading docks have all been designed to industry standards, which meet, again, both the township's requirements as well as typical industry standards in terms of dimensional standards. So again, from a traffic engineering perspective, we found that the driveway access points are designed safely and efficiently. The impact on the roadway network, adding about 1 new car every minute. And again, if I said we saw a car out of the driveway now, and then waited another minute to say that's the second car that leaves the driveway, you would see that with comparison to the traffic on Washington Avenue, 1 vehicle a minute is pretty de minimis. And we've shown that the driveways can work. And we think that with a cross-access driveway, the county is helping us pursue with the neighbor to the north. Having the access point via the signalized driveway at Knox Drive would be obviously an advantage to this application.
So ingress and egress is okay, internal circulation, okay?
Correct, yes.
Parking is adequate?
Yes.
And then how about the EV parking? We comply with
EV, we're looking to comply with the statutes and ordinances, so we would be in compliance with the necessary township ordinance.
It's a state law, and we will comply.
Yes.
I can make that representation to the board as well. Is there anything in Mr. Chen's report that you think you need to address, or perhaps I should just ask the board to inquire of Mr. Chen? Does he have any questions that you haven't answered?
Board members, do you have any questions for this witness, Matt Cedar?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, it's Councilwoman Kale. Could we just clarify the comments that were just made about those EV stations?
We'll comply.
With the township ordinance?
Actually, I can mention that. They comply with the township ordinance of live EV. What they need to show on the plans, or they have represented that they will provide make ready. Would that be a quick, concise summary?
Ron?
Correct.
Yes. Yeah. So right now they previously complied with 8 that they required, and I think they need to provide some more. So whatever whatever the final parking is going to, I think that they would need 14 in total. So I think that they have 8 live and 6 make ready. Does that
Right.
sound about right?
The report says 15, just so you know.
Well, it was, but that's because you may be reading the earlier report.
Oh, okay.
They reduced their parking because they eliminated what about 20 in
Got
building
it.
B?
Yep. I'm sorry. It did come email.
No,
Yep.
no worries. Listen, when I'm doing those percentages, I get a little dizzy myself. So
Okay.
we're good.
But we're happy.
Thank you.
Mr. Chen, do you have any comments?
I do have a question about the accessible portion of the EV spaces. The way I was reading it, it seemed like you guys were proposing one accessible EV space in the front. Are you guys? I believe you might require a second one based on the second lot. Are you guys gonna be able to comply with that?
Yes.
Okay.
The answer is yes. Any other questions for this witness from the board?
Mr. Chen, you're satisfied?
I guess like the only other question, which I believe was addressed earlier, was there was an error in the note on the drawing on sheet C-04. Basically, my 9th comment. Your site plan says 80 parking stalls, and your table had 71 parking spaces. And I believe Mr. Allenbach had mentioned that you guys would comply with that to correct the discrepancy.
Correct. Yes, we would.
Okay.
Ron, you want to confirm that as well?
Yes, we agree to that.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Chen. I appreciate it very much.
No problem.
Any other questions from the board members? Dawn, is your hand up? No, no.
It is
wasn't?
not, thank you.
Okay, all right. I thought I'd seen her hand go.
He's
Okay.
stretching.
Oh, any public? Anyone from the public?
Yes, Brian Rack has his hand up.
Okay,
Yeah, Brian Rex,
go ahead.
still at 1247 Brookside Road. You can swear me in again if you want. You tell me.
Yeah, we'll swear you in for this application, Ms.
Okay.
Saunders. So you're
Mrs.
muted.
Saunders? She's muted?
You gotta unmute Carol.
Okay, yeah, because I'm double muted. Please raise your right hand.
Sure.
Please swear that the testimony you're about to give me the truth and nothing but the truth.
Yes.
Thank you.
What are you expecting truck traffic to do to get to 287 South? Is that going to go down Metlers and then Stelton to get there? Are you thinking they're going to make a left onto South Washington and then onto Centennial? I mean, both those roads are pretty traffic heavy, so.
Yeah, they would be making a left onto South Washington and then heading north on South Washington 287. As was mentioned, we are pursuing with the county's assistance cross access to the Knox driveway, which would give us a signalized access point to be able to make left turns onto South Washington Avenue.
Okay, yeah, I mean, I drive by that lot at least a couple times a week, and I think making a left on South Washington as a truck without a signal is going to be very difficult to do safely. So, I mean, that's my big concern with the traffic flow there. But that's all I have. Thanks.
Thank you.
Okay, is there anyone else? Okay.
No
Are
one.
you finished, Doug? You have another witness?
One final witness.
Okay, you may proceed.
Could you unmute, please? And perhaps
I am unmuted.
you could swear her in.
Carol, want to swear her in?
You're muted.
Carol?
You're
Want
muted.
to swear
Sorry,
her in?
I gotta unmute again. Can you please raise your right hand? Do you swear that the testimony you're about to give me the truth and nothing but the truth?
Yes, I do.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Christine, briefly, would you give the board a summary of your credentials and whether and to what extent you've appeared before boards such as this in the past as an expert planner?
Yes, of course. Good evening, Chair and members of the board. For the record, Christine Zaracafone. I'm a licensed professional planner. I have testified in Piscataway before both the planning and zoning board, as well in excess of 400 or so other planning and zoning boards throughout the state of New Jersey. I've been practicing as a planning consultant for about 27 years. I teach planning and zoning courses for the Rutgers Center for Government Services. My licenses are current and in good standing. I do have a master's degree in city and regional planning from Rutgers, and I am also an affordable housing special master.
You have been approved. You are approved.
All right, thank you very much. Christine, I know it's a variance for the application, but there was noted one waiver about the front yard parking. Could you address that and indicate why you think that the board should grant that waiver for us?
So yes, it is a substantially conforming application. And the reason I believe the waiver should be granted is because essentially there is a bit of a conflict in the township's ordinance.
Can we identify, I'm sorry, but can we identify for the record what the waiver is we're requesting?
Sure. So the waiver that we would be requesting would be from section 24702 2E3, I believe it is. Which is for the general location. And the way that section of the ordinance reads is that no off-street parking or loading shall be located in a minimum required front yard. All parking shall be located in bays generally perpendicular to driveways or roads. Now, please be mindful that that comes out of section 24 of your ordinance entitled Site Plan Review. Anything coming out of that section would be a design waiver. However, there's another section of your ordinance, chapter 21, which deals with, it's entitled zoning. In that section, section 21-1101.2, there are regulations regarding parking lots. Specifically, in that section, it reads about the third line in, parking may be located in the front yard area, but no closer than 25 feet to the street line in business zones and no closer than 25 feet to the street line in industrial zones. So clearly there's a conflict in the ordinance because the zoning, which in my opinion would be the stricter and more stringent requirement. If you require something that you violate in section 21, you would need a variance from that. Whereas the aforementioned section that I read, section 24, is where we need the waiver from. So the more controlling section allows you to have parking and specifically states in that section of the ordinance, parking may be located in the front yard area, but no closer than 10 feet to the street line in business zones and no closer than 25 feet to the street line in industrial zones. So from a planning point of view, I think it's certainly appropriate for the board to consider that waiver, specifically in light of the fact that the language in the zoning code, section 21, allows for parking in the exact location that we're providing it. So therefore, I find that the board can certainly grant the waiver that we're requesting, and it certainly is in conjunction with the contemplated ordinance and the standards in the ordinance for the location of parking in your industrial zones, which the subject property is now currently located.
So just to summarize, under the zoning ordinance, what we're doing is fine. But under the site plan ordinance, it conflicts with their own zoning ordinance. Is that right?
Correct. Under chapter 21, which is your zoning ordinance in Piscataway, we're conforming. In fact, there's a specific provision in there telling you that you may have parking in the front yard. Section 24, the site plan review, which is the waivers and the design guidelines, has a bit of a conflict in that section that I read, where it talks about a general location. So much less specific. The more specific and stringent requirements in the Piscataway code, we are conforming with. So that informs my decision as a planner that this is a reasonable waiver, reasonable to implement the site plan that's before the board this evening.
So, Mr. Chairman and Mr. Barlow, it's the applicant's position that the waiver is not necessary because we comply with the ordinance, which we believe controls. But to the extent that council or the board believes that a waiver is still necessary because there is that section, our argument is, as Ms. Cafone indicated, it's an appropriate waiver to grant because we are consistent with the zoning ordinance, which is the much more stringent argument. As you know, it would require a variance, with C2 or C1 criteria, as opposed to a waiver, which is a much lesser standard. So that's our proofs with regard to the only waiver we're asking for, and that's the conclusion of Ms. Cafone's testimony.
Yeah.
She's available.
Mr. Wilson, just a clarification. You're talking about the parking on South Washington is where you need the waiver from, correct?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
And both councils, I was just going to point out that just for clarification purposes, a variance, Ron Reiner, since you guys can't see me, a variance requires satisfying the positive and negative criteria. A waiver is more localized. Ms. Cafone, wouldn't you agree that a waiver is more a design element that would be considered? It's not, you're not weighing the positive and negative criteria. It's a
100%,
less.
Mr. Reinerstein. It's a far less standard. The test is reasonableness. That's what I said. When you're
Yes.
dealing with a variance, so if we were asking for relief from section 21, I would have to talk about the C1 or the C2 applicability of the statute. Because it's coming out of section 24, the test is the waiver reasonable in order to effectuate or implement the site plan that's before the board? It's the reasonableness of the waiver. And I think, like I said, given that there's another section of the ordinance dealing with zoning that would allow for the parking in the exact location that we're showing it, I would have a difficult position coming to the conclusion that the waiver is not reasonable. But you're absolutely correct on the test of the waiver.
And that's what I wanted to clarify for, because while we have a contradiction, sometimes ordinances say the more stringent requirement applies. But in this case, it's not a conflict between variances. It's a conflict between the zoning ordinance of which is in 21 and the site plan section, which involves design waivers.
Right, which is
so it is one of those the board has to weigh. Basically, it is a much less stringent relief that they're looking for.
Thank you, Mr. Reinerstein. That would conclude Mr. Cafone's testimony. So if board members have questions, of course.
Mr. Barlow, could you address that along with Ron? How would we address that if both sections say one thing and another section says the other? Could you address that?
Absolutely. I didn't want to just belabor it, but as has been pointed out by both planners, the design waiver is a much lower standard. They don't need a variance. They don't need to go to negative, positive criteria. They've laid out why they think it's a reasonable request. You've seen the layout of the parking, which kind of surrounds the project, which probably makes it better than sticking, 150 spots in one spot, in the back of the property, say, and making people walk, especially when you have two buildings. So they've kind of tried to, and Mr. Wilson can correct me, they've tried to kind of surround each building with parking to make it convenient for the respective tenants that may move in there, as opposed to just shoving all the parking in one space, which could be unsafe and also leads to like a sea of asphalt, which it's not aesthetically pleasing, and it spreads it out a little better. So it's a much lower, that's why it's just a waiver. It's really just reasonableness, and I think that's been addressed.
Thank you, Mr. Barlow. You clarified that perfectly for me, so everyone understands that more effectively.
That as well, Mr. Barlow. We said that we would come back to that one aspect of the case. I see Ms. Corcoran's shaking her head. Yes, I didn't forget. We need to address this deceleration issue. For the record, the board, my position as a legal matter is that the road is a county road, and we have a conditional county approval that doesn't relate to this issue. The county doesn't seem to want the deceleration lane, and yet it is a township requirement to do so. What we can do is we can agree that to the extent that the municipality can convince the county that this is an appropriate thing, and if there's an additional requirement that we do that, Ron, we will agree to do it, won't we?
Yes, one caveat, Doug, if I can, just because I was able to speak to ownership. And as I indicated earlier, between Matt's testimony and my confirmation or my testimony about it being a county jurisdiction. We didn't think the deceleration lane was necessarily required. I know the mayor disagrees with the county's position. Obviously, the application that's before you tonight has driveways at both the north and south side. And we don't believe it's necessary for the southern driveway for two reasons. We anticipate that the connection between our site and Knox Drive will be obtained. And when that easement is obtained and our traffic is going out to the signal, we would agree as any condition of any approval that the southern driveway be converted to a right-in, right-out driveway. They will have access to the signal. And therefore, deceleration lane will not be needed as a southern driveway because it's a right in, right out. But most of the traffic will be coming into signal. The northern driveway, we have limited room to what we could do there because of its close proximity to not only the property line, but the adjoining signal. So I don't know if that helps, makes it any clearer, but that was ownership's position that with the Knox Drive connection, we don't think it's necessary, and we would convert that southern driveway.
Mr. Wilson, or Mr. Allenbach, just by way of clarification, I understand what you're saying as to the county, but if the county comes back and says, you know what, we've reviewed this, and we believe there needs to be a deceleration lane put in, the township's concern is that the applicant would turn that required property over, which the township would have to acquire, at no cost. That's the main concern. And again, I don't want to speak for the board, but I think that's Mr. Hinterstein's concern is, will the applicant comply with that as a condition of approval if the county were to require it? Dawn, would you agree with that?
No, I do agree with that, Tom.
And I can say, because I spoke to ownership, that if that was the case, the applicant would agree to bear all costs of whatever property is necessary. We don't think if the deceleration lane is installed, we don't believe additional property is required, but in the event, and it's not our property, we would agree to pay for any offsite property requirements, as well as pay for the installation of the decel lane, so there would be no
cost to the town.
Monetary or cost to the township.
Including
That's what I was trying to say, but I clearly wasn't as articulate as Mr. Allen.
That's fine. I just I understand pay for any improvements, including land acquisition.
Correct.
Okay.
Okay, is there anything else?
You good with that, Dawn? Is that okay now?
I'm fine with that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Dawn, you're fine with that?
That's the conclusion of our proofs, Mr. Chairman.
I'm sorry, that's all that you have for us, Mr. Wolfson?
That's why I asked.
Okay. So I'm going to take exception here and go back to my first point that Mr. Allenbach needed to be sworn in. We have a point. Yes.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off, but I don't know if we ever opened to the public after Ms. Caffone's testimony.
Okay, that's fine.
I think we started to bounce around, and just for the completeness, I think we should just open it to the public.
Open it up for the public.
Then
okay.
Mr. Wilson
I can come back. Thank you.
Okay. No problem. So does anyone have any questions for Ms. Caffone?
Anyone in the public? Laura, do you see anyone?
No one's raising their hand.
Okay, close to the public.
Thank you, Councilwoman Cahill.
No, that's the right thing to do. So a couple of things here. I asked about Mr. Allenbach being sworn in, and I was told he was just going to lay out the plan. But now I understand that our item asking on the site impact for testimony of the color scheme or something to that effect.
Building colors.
Yeah, I mean, that's not testimony unless he's sworn in. Am I right? Is that a legal matter or no? Am I wrong?
No, you're not wrong, but he was sworn in, Councilwoman. He wasn't qualified to be an expert in
Oh,
all.
I'm sorry. Okay. So I apologize.
But we did swear him in.
Okay, I apologize. I overlay. So
okay,
I want to get back to that because that's a big thing for me. And we really glossed over it, I think, because coming before us, Mr. Wolfson, it was like seemingly there wasn't a lot to do here. But I do want to go back to those plans. It's something that when applicants come before us, I am
of course
fairly clear about. Okay, and so I would like to, yeah, I'm sorry. Well, I know we have something here not colorized, but if those plans could be brought back up with the color key, I wanted to note something on that. I don't know that it can be changed or considered, but if I'm accurate, this color key, and I apologize, I can't read it very well, are the colors on the screen essentially the colors of the building? The blues?
Yeah, yes.
All right. I'm going to be a thorn in your side about that, because I don't know if you've looked around at other buildings in our town. They're mostly more muted colors. I mean, is there any particular reason why the blue hue was a color picked? Is it a particular tenant's request? I didn't think you have any. Is there any kind of leeway here? And I know it's going to sound pretty de minimis to you, but it means a lot to me since these are going to be very large structures. They're going to be visible, and they're not going to go away for a while.
Ms. Cahill, Mr. Chairman, if I may, again, we're not married to these colors. We do not have a tenant. It's simply something that I think the architect just put on, what he thought was a good color scheme. If the board, yourself and the rest of the board or the staff would like to have us work with staff to come up with more of an earth tone, neutral colors, happy to do that. We're not married to these colors. They were just something to show diversity in the building. So if it means that we have to introduce a tan or a light brown or something that makes it more of that earth tone that you had referred to earlier, absolutely, it's something we can work with your professionals on.
And I appreciate that because I'm sure in your mind, this is like not a major issue, but for me, it really is and has been with every applicant who's come before this board where I at least get a say or an opinion of sorts. I think it would be, if I may ask for the staff to include it as part of the application. I don't know that we'll approve it tonight, but it would feel like the right thing to do in this case. And if it did not mean one thing or another to the owner in terms of that color scheme, meaning that there was no particular reason why, I would just ask that, and that would be my big ask.
Now, Councilman, we would accept as a condition of approval that this board were to grant that we work with staff in order to come up with a color scheme that is consistent with the township's general schemes. It would be probably helpful.
I really do appreciate that. And I'm a little persnickety when it comes to that stuff. So I do apologize, if I came off a little bit that way, but it is how I am when it comes to these things, for sure.
I would call you dedicated.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Perhaps you could give your input to the staff so that they have a sense of what you're looking for when they meet with us.
Yeah, this staff is pretty well versed. There was an exceptional, building structure that was done at the end of River Road. And no offense to the town next door, but they plopped a white and blue warehouse right next to our beautiful warehouses where we really, in some ways gave it to the developer of the land to really make sure that what was out there would be, aesthetically pleasing as much as warehouses can be to the eye. And then certainly as you bend around the corner, there's an Amazon white and blue warehouse, which, sorry to the town next door, but they didn't do a good job there. No offense, but And if you represented them, I apologize.
That'll have to come up in the next master plan re-exam.
So Councilwoman Cahill, you'd be okay as a condition of approval that the applicant would work with staff as to the color palette, so to speak?
Yeah, I mean, I think we have a whole conversation, other things that we have to talk about in terms of the approval, but, you know, and I have opinions on those too, which we know what they're like, but I am definitely of the mind that if it's not of any particular reasoning for this color scheme, that if the applicant is willing to work with staff, that would be a condition.
Can we unshare the screen?
We'll go with that.
Are you satisfied with that, Gabby? Okay. Is there anything else?
Yes,
Mr.
Chairman.
Wilson? Okay, thank you.
Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Wilson, are you complete?
We are complete, and like the applicant before you, I will waive any summation or concluding remarks. The record speaks for itself, and nothing that I say is evidence. You have heard all the evidence. I think that the town was acted appropriately when it rezoned this property. It was clear to us and the court that rural residential zoning was inappropriate, that this is an appropriate zone. We've taken that to heart and had an application before you that is consistent with your zoning ordinance in all respects. Even the one waiver issue, it's consistent with the zoning ordinance. We've seen no variances. We have accommodated, I believe, any of the board and consultants' requests for conditions, and we're satisfied with the presentation, and we'd ask the board for a favorable vote, subject to any conditions that the board members and council believe to be necessary and appropriate. And I thank you for your attention. And I wanted to make sure we got done by 10:30. It looks like we just about made it.
Thank you, Mr. Wilson. Board members, you've heard all the statements and reports coming in from this applicant. What is your pleasure? Do I hear a motion?
Chairman,
Yes.
Chairman Kenny, if we
Yes,
can
Mayor.
we have Mr. Barlow have a list of the conditions? We're gonna get that D-cell lane, Mr. Allenback, because I'm not voting for it unless it's in it. We need to make sure all the conditions that the board members need to know what they're voting on.
Okay, thank you, Mayor. Mr. Barlow?
Mr. Chairman, sorry, back up one more thing too, is that since we don't get another crack at, you know, if this does get approved, if the applicant does agree to all of the township's asks there and requirements by ordinance, I do want to make sure that also condition of approval is that that there is no trucks allowed to make a right-hand turn onto South Washington headed towards Mettler's Lane, because that goes towards residential. And that is an absolute for me.
Thank you, Councilman Cahill. Mr. Barlow, Esquire Barlow, would you bring us up to what we need to do as conditions for this applicant?
Certainly, I'll do my best, Reverend Kenny, and I'm sure Mr. Wilson will correct me as I go along. The applicant agreed to, on the record, almost everything in the staff reports. As you heard, they agreed to the DPW requirement. They agreed to all of the engineering requirements. They agreed as a condition of approval to work with the staff as to the architectural kind of color palette of the project. I believe they agreed to if the county requires the deceleration lane, that they would pay for all of the costs associated with that, the signaling.
Mr. Barlow, I'm gonna cut you off here. We're gonna build the D-cell lane, otherwise I'm gonna vote no.
Okay.
Listen, we got one bite at the apple, and another thing, I know we have a 600-foot buffer between the edge of the building there, which is heavily wooded. We've been having problems around town with the ash trees dying. I want that on a bi-yearly basis or yearly basis that there's a review of that buffer out there between that and the school to make sure that if some of those trees die naturally, that something's going to be replanted back. And Mr. Wolfson, there'll be no vote for me coming unless that decel lane comes in. And I strongly urge my members to vote no, that's not.
Mayor, and we're certainly agreeable to do it if the county says to do it.
Well, I guess,
No, it's their road.
no, you're not going to hang this on the county. There will be a decel lane there, period. Period.
I don't know how to
Don't
respond.
push it off on the
Mr.
county
Mayor,
engineer.
I've been doing this a very long time.
Decel lane.
I've been doing this a
You're
very long
telling me
time.
you're not going to build it now, then I'm voting no.
We,
And I strongly advise my other board members to vote no.
I can't tell you that the county will let us. You know,
We've had-
I strongly believe that they're going to like, so as a requirement, I'm expecting you to vote no. I mean, I have a huge problem if there's no decel lane.
And Mr. Wolfson, if I may, it's Dawn Corcoran. The staff, township attorney, we have met with the county. We've made it very clear our position with regard to that deceleration lane. We will continue to have that conversation with the county, but you know, the township, the staff, we feel very, very strongly that it's required and necessary. So
I know, but I have no authority to do modifications to the county road. And so what can I do? Mr. Barlow, I need your help here. And I know how strong the mayor feels about it, but I can't agree to a condition that if they don't want it. I mean, we're happy to do it if they say yes. We're happy to support you in your request to the county. They ask them to say yes. We're not looking to get out of this.
Well, then, Miss, I have to vote no, and I'm strongly urging the rest of my members to vote no on this application. Mr. Wolfson, this is it. There's another decel lane out there going into the other site next door. This one has to have a decel lane. We're only getting one bite at the apple on this, and that's it.
And if I may, Mr. Chair, I stand with the mayor on this, and of course, all the other requirements I had, so.
Thank you, Madam Carrier. I'm looking at it as being a former state police officer. I'm looking at it as a safety aspect of it for the township, because we got up to 53 footers now, and without that deceleration lane, I know you did your safety check in regards to trucks and stuff, but I've been involved with trucks and traffic for a long time, and my concern is the safety aspect of it without that lane. Okay, that's my opinion as a board member. Okay.
I would ask council and the staff with regard to the other deceleration lane that the mayor referred to. Did the county approve that? Because if they did, they certainly should be able to approve ours.
You're referring to the Trammell Crow project, correct?
I mean, this may be a fight over nothing. If the county has already granted the deceleration lane on their county road on a property contiguous to ours, I can't imagine why they wouldn't agree in this case.
But this is a township.
Well, I know, but there are rules.
Go right ahead.
You can't change state highway. You can't change.
And
the
Mr.
county.
Wilson, in all fairness, I would have to pull out those plans. That project goes back quite a lot of years, so I don't know offhand. It's certainly something we can research, but I can't say for certain right now that they can be approved.
I can't, in good conscience, say that I agree with the approach, notwithstanding the safety issue and notwithstanding the mayor's strong feelings about this. And I would ask Mr. Barlow if he thinks I'm making a mistake or I'm in error as to the jurisdictional snafu that's been created here. But I don't own that land. You don't own that land. The county does. So for you to tell me that I have to tell the county.
I'll tell you what, Mr. Wolfson, here's what we're going to do.
Do that.
we're going to close out the testimony tonight. We're not going to take a vote until this gets resolved. Because I'll tell you right now, if it doesn't happen, I'm voting no.
Well, look, under those circumstances, Mr. Chairman, impose it as a condition and we'll do the best we can to go to the county, understanding that it's a condition. I don't know what else to tell you. There's no reason not to vote on it. There's, we're within the time frame. It's appropriate to do it.
Mayor, can I make this suggestion that when I was listening before all the other conditions, I was going to get to that one, but we had the architectural, we had the granting of the half width along, which would trigger the variance, which the board would grant because of the half width, and as a condition of approval that the applicant has to put in the deceleration lane. And if they don't believe that they can comply with that condition, they would have to seek review of that. But if the county has previously had a previous applicant put a deceleration lane in, that certainly seems like it would reinforce the township's position that it needs another deceleration lane. So that could certainly be a condition of approval if the board makes that application.
Tom, when you finish, Ron has his hand up.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Ron.
Yeah, if it's appropriate, I was able to reach out to ownership, and we would agree to the decel lane as well as no right out, as Councilwoman Cahill mentioned.
So ownership is good with the mayor's request and Councilwoman Cahill's request.
Correct.
Excellent.
Mr. Wolfson, the reason why I'm very hot and heavy on this one is because there's no guarantees that you're going to be able to get the access at this point out at the other light. There isn't.
No, I don't question your motives, Mr. Mayor. I know them. I've known you a long time. I know your interest is only in protecting the town and its citizens and good planning. And I do appreciate it. And we've known each other a long time. So you don't have to justify your actions. I know they're well-meaning, well thought out.
Well, I wasn't justifying it to you. I was justifying it to the residents of Piscataway. Like,
of course. Okay, well, that seems to resolve that issue. Mr. Barlow, Mr. Chairman, and Mr. Mayor, Woman Cahill. So I don't know
Mr.
if
Barlow, can you go back? I'm sorry, Mr.
Yeah, I don't know if
Barlow, can you go back through with the list of conditions?
Yep.
Okay. Obviously, the record will speak for itself if I missed something that they previously agreed to, but they've agreed to the deceleration lane. They've agreed to no right onto South Washington. They've agreed to work with the staff as to the architectural color palette, so to speak, of what the warehouses would look like. They've agreed to the half width, which as a result of that agreement triggers a variance that would be needed of approximately 4 feet for the encroachment into the setback, along with the other, I would say, smaller items they agreed to during the course of the hearing. Did I hit most of them or the high points, Mr. Wilson?
Yeah, I would just try to clarify the thing about the extension from the 48 feet to the 52. We're not seeking a variance. We just wanted to point out to the board that if that was a condition, as it seems to be, then you're looking at creating a non-conforming situation. We don't need to apply for the variance because that was not our plan. But I just wanted to make sure the board understood if it included that as a condition, that would be the result. So we're not putting up proofs on that, but we understand that to be a request and it's a condition that we would agree to.
Okay.
And then, Mr. Barlow, we need to talk about the issue, as I just mentioned before, about the mature woods, that the difference of the 600 between the school property line and the building, that, we've been having problems like other areas of the state where a lot of these trees have been dying with the disease. I don't want to be 10 years down the road and then we have a whole deforest area that was a nice natural buffer between the adjacent property lines. So we need to have some type of mechanism, Mr. Barlow, about making sure that that stays in place as best as possible.
That's something that
How are we going to do that? I mean, because we'd have to check it, like, the
Well-
township would have to check it, but then how do we come to an agreement, Mr. Mayor, with like, what is it, a dollar figure they have to put in, or is it just tree for tree and it's checked every year? Like, how can we get that put in there? Because it is
I
very
think we
important.
have to have Henry and Dawn, somebody's gonna have to go and take a look out there. I mean, we don't want anything to die out there, but unfortunately, we're having a lot of diseases in some of the trees, and we're having to unfortunately take down a lot of trees on the governmental side. that is spreading.
Right, and correct me if I'm wrong, but again, referring back to the down on River Road, they did agree for the same thing. Am I correct on that application? It was a while ago, but I do remember a very similar issue. The less of
About
a
5
buffer
years ago.
there. Right, okay. So
And if
not an ask that we haven't gone for before, Dawn, right?
Yeah.
That is correct. And if they don't maintain the buffer, then they fall in violation of their site plan approval. And then we have mechanisms to go after them for that. So we can make that a condition of the approval, and we can have, as you said, Henry go out there yearly and, hopefully it's maintained. And if not, we'll certainly deal with it. I'm completely fine with that condition.
So just to make sure I'm clear on, Ms. Corcoran, so once the building is in place, we have the baseline of what the buffer looks like on that date. And then that is now a condition to maintain that in generally the same condition going forward. And that a bunch of trees die, a condition of the site plan is the buffer is to be maintained in generally the same condition. And you want to make that a condition of approval. I don't know how we can object to that. And I agree with you that if it's a condition of the site plan, that buffer remains generally in that, that width, that shape, that size. I just want to make sure that, if a 100-year-old tree that's 4 feet in diameter dies, we don't replace it with a 100-foot tree, with 4 feet.
No,
in diameter.
we're not expecting that. That would be unrealistic.
I just want to, but you know what? 10 years from now, 20 years from now, no one's going to remember what we did today. So I just want, Tom to craft it.
Well,
in a way
Mr. Wilson, I have a very good memory. I guarantee you, if the board keeps me around, I will remember.
I'm trying to articulate that condition in a way that makes it clear that it's not, a tree for tree replacement of exactly the same kind.
it's more the maintenance of the buffer between the property and the residential area is the concern. So I'm sure we can couch language.
Not only are we good with that, but you'd be irresponsible to not require that.
Yep. Okay.
And Tom, I also want to leave, I want to have this conversation with Henry Hinterstein as well. And if he does require, a plan showing, I just want to leave it open so that if he has some sort of requirement, just to like kind of know what's out there today, I mean, something to compare to. I don't know that the plans, they're not very specific as to what's out there in that buffer. So I just want to leave it open so that in the event we need additional information, the applicant will work with staff just to have some kind of like baseline to work off of.
Sure. The applicant will work with.
Can I point out that Ron has a question that he raised?
Go ahead, Ron.
Sorry. I just want to make sure we're clear because a couple of people are talking about this buffer between us, the school, us and the residential houses. There's a lot of property there that's between us and those houses and school that we don't own. I want to make sure that we're not going to be responsible for planting trees on somebody else's property. If it's the existing buffer that's between our property line and our parking lot, obviously I'm okay with that. I just want to make sure because a couple of people mentioned about the wooded area or trees between us and the houses. I don't even know who owns that, if the Board of Education owns or who owns the property behind us, but if they come in clear, I can't be responsible for going there and planting trees on somebody else's property.
No, Ron, I'm not, Reverend Kenny, or Chairman Kenny, I'm not expecting you to do that, Ron. I'm only what the applicant owns.
Okay, thank you.
On the applicant's property.
And thanks for pointing that out, Ron, because I hadn't thought of that.
Dawn, are you raising your hand?
Basically, that's what we've been doing.
No, I'm sorry.
all the time.
I'm so sorry. I just sit at the table like that. But I do see what Ron's saying. I'm taking a look at the landscape plan now, and clearly the buffer does exceed beyond their property line. So again, Ron, we might just have to work with you to see, you know, to come up with some sort of plan as to what it is out there and what exists, you know, today.
Understood.
You know.
Okay.
Hey,
Thank
I'm
you.
sorry to interrupt. I know I'm just part of the public, but we just signed a contract with a tree
Who's
place
speaking?
near us. Brian Rack.
Mr. Rack, it's
Chairman,
not
I-
open to the public right
Out of
now.
order,
so
and
I'm
please,
sorry.
Can I just make one comment
No,
about the
no,
ash
no,
trees?
Reverend Kenny, this is closed
It's
to the public
closed.
right now.
It's closed to the public. You had a chance to talk.
Okay. So the main conditions I have are the decel lane right out only onto South Washington, the half width, which triggers the potential for the variance, and that the mature trees in that buffer zone will be maintained, and the applicant will work with the township's professional staff with regards to same.
And the color scheme.
And the color scheme, yes, sorry.
Yeah, I would prefer, of course, it's up to you, Tom, that you don't put anything in the resolution about the variance, because we're not asking for a variance. I don't want there to be an issue in front of some judge later that, you know, a variance was created. Your condition is that we do this, and we're agreeing to the condition.
No, I understand, but I just don't want to gloss over the potential effect of it, I guess. I just.
Yeah,
want
I
that.
just want, right, we want the board to be aware of what they're voting on.
Yeah.
But I don't want there to be any suggestion that we needed to apply for or prove the need for the variance.
No.
Esquire Barlow, what you're stating that, and Mr. Wolf, that you work with Mr. Hinterstein on this buffering. Is that correct?
Absolutely, absolutely.
Okay. Now that would make it clear. That's what you need to do if you want to get this resolved.
So Mayor Waller, is that, I think we've
Mayor?
laid out all the conditions. Is
That's just suffice, Mr. Barlow.
Perfect. So at
Thank
this
you,
point,
Mr. Mayor.
Reverend Kenny, it would be appropriate if the board wants to entertain a motion.
All right. The board members, you've heard all the comments, pros and cons. Do I hear a motion in order for this application to be approved or not to be approved? Do I hear a motion?
Mr. Chairman, Dawn Corcoran, I'd like to make a motion that we approve the application subject to all of the conditions as outlined by Mr. Barlow.
Do I hear a second?
Carol Saunders, second.
Okay. Roll call, please.
Mayor Waller,
Before I vote, I just want to make two general comments. For the members of the public, and I know the applicant knows this, there was a court settlement for, I believe it was 270 townhouses out there when it was under the zoning board jurisdiction. I believe that this current application before this board is less of intensive use out there than what would have happened with the 275 units out there, because you would have had a lot more trip generations coming off this site, impacting the school system, both financially, social services. This way, we're not gonna have any impact on the social services or less municipal services, so to speak. I know there's a lot of folks out there that are disappointed. They would have rather seen the housing, but I respectfully disagree on this. I believe that this application would be a net positive for the town in respect for revenue and not impacting the school system, overloading the classrooms with kids in the school system of what would have happened in the court settlement. So I vote yes, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. His comments.
Councilwoman Cahill?
Sorry, I'm getting an error message. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh, okay. So yes, based upon the applicant's willingness to meet all of the requirements as set forth by Mr. Barlow, that I will vote yes for this application.
Ms. Corcoran?
Yes.
Ms. Saunders?
Yes.
Reverend Kenny?
Yes.
Mr. Espinoza?
Yes.
Mr. Atkins?
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Mr. Chairman,
you,
thank you
Mr.
very
Wilson.
much. Mr. Mayor, Councilwoman Kale, thank you very much.
Thank you all.
Council professionals, Dawn, Ron, Evan, we really appreciate your hard work and review and getting us to the point where we are really able to eliminate all the variances here. We think it's a great plan. We hope you think it is, and we look forward to getting the things done that the mayor and councilwoman want. Thanks again very much.
Have a good
Thank
night.
you, sir.
Have a good evening.
Thank you, Esquire Barlow, Mr. Mayor. Learned a lot more tonight.
We need a motion to adjourn.
Send me a draft of the res before you submit it to everybody else.
Of course.
Thanks very much. Have a good night, everybody.
Good night.
Night.
A motion to adjourn?
I'll make that motion, Dawn Corcoran.
Second.
Seconded, Carol Saunders.
Good night, all.
Good night.
All those in
Good
favor,
night.
say aye.
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 Bye.
Good night, everyone.
Aye.
Good night.
Good night.